Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's February 8th, 2024, and we're going to start the business meeting of the Governing Board of the South Florida Water Management District. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and let's see, Colonel Rowan, would you mind starting? Oh, thank you, Charlotte. Vice Chair Wagner is on the phone. Mr. Martinez and Mr. Bergeron are on the highway, and they will be here in a minute. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Meads as well. Gosh, everyone's on the highway. Board members, I'm going to ask that you make sure your microphone is on and you please speak into the mic so online attendees can hear you. If you turn your head while you're speaking, drag the mic with you so they can still hear you. Members of the public on Zoom who wish to address the board may use the raise your hand feature. If members of the public are having any trouble and need help, please go to our website, which is sfwmd.gov, and click the Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you're using a phone and you'd like to comment, press star 9 to raise your hand and star 6 to mute and unmute. As a courtesy to others who wish to speak, members of the public are asked to comment only once on each topic. We'll take public comment first from those who are here in person and submitted a comment card, followed by those who raised their hand. Now, we've got plenty of employee recognitions. The room is full. I'm looking forward to that. Mr. Bartlett.
Excellent. All right, I got my work cut out for me today. I might get a recognition one of these months. So, let's start with Employee of the Year. And we had 12 incredible employees of the month over 2023. But our Employee of the Year is Lisette Sori, Section Administrator in our Budget Support. Now, clearly Lisette has a lot of fans, and there's a reason. She is in our budget program, and as you know, board, our budget program is top-notch, works extremely hard to keep us straight, and she's very much a key part of that team. And her responsibility is really kind of making sure that all of our funding stays on track when it comes to external funds, state funds, federal funds, and local funds that come into the district. And guess what? We only have $1 billion of those dollars to keep track of, and there's Lisette front and center keeping track of it for everybody. She is very much depended on by all the programs that use those funds, because all the programs do use those funds. She keeps them straight. We don't get into trouble, right? We could easily get into trouble with those funds if we don't keep it straight, and she keeps us very much out of trouble. I very much appreciate her because of what she does for our TRIM process. Ad valorem dollars are extremely important for us to collect, no more important than this past fall, and she has relationships with every county and the Department of Revenue, and every year we get that letter saying we're in complete compliance, and it's because of her efforts to get that done. Everyone enjoys working for Lisette. Everyone depends on Lisette, and it's very much understood why she is our 2023 Employee of the Year. Lisette. by the way. She's been doing it for 35 years, so she knows everything about the district. All right. Our 2023 Team of the Year is a very large team. It's our Taylor Slough Flow Improvement Project team. Actually, let me read their names. We have Holly Andriotta, Barry Brown, Ryan Brown, Jesse Browning, Diane Cruz, Luis De Leon, Brian Furlan, Steele Holiday, love that name, Ronnie Hudson, Nirmala Jayakumar, Ozell Jones, Jack Kilgore, Claudette Livingston, Brian McEachern, Cody McElroy, Michael Mata, Quincy Moulton, Jeremy Padrick, Luis Colon Pinero, Roscoe Prescott, Armando Ramirez, Jorge Serrano, Jenny Smith, Sandra Smith, James Sneckenberg, James Strickland, Greg Tulan, Homero Jones, Matthew Van Leeuwen, Natasha Warrich, Ryan Whipple, and Linda Yarish. 2023, Team of the Year. So, 2023, so this project was critically important for Everglades National Park, and this team came together and broke ground and cut the ribbon on this project in 2023. 4 months of construction, and the impressive thing about this to me is that it was all done in-house, right? Our design was done in-house, our engineering was done in-house. We didn't permit ourselves, but we did use our employees to get those permits. Our wildlife and cultural training and everything was done in-house. Our veg management was done with our in-house contractors. The survey was done. The project materials was all gathered by the Homestead Field Station. The construction was conducted out of Okeechobee. And we had a great time at the events. They were there and they enjoyed it. Everglades National Park and Taylor Slough is getting better because of this team's effort. Because we all did it in-house, that's why it's so big. We got a lot of hands to shake. Congratulations, 2023 Team of the Year. You're Jones now.
He will be from now on.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Take one there. Congratulations. And congrats. Yep. Congratulations. Congratulations. Almost there. Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Congratulations. Yep.
All right. Okay, now let's get to the January 2024 Employee of the Month. That is Tadis Adiagbo, STA Vegetation Management Science Senior, Land Resources Bureau. Now, you know what's hard? Managing vegetation or STAs and FEBs. They want to get in there. All these exotics really want to get in there, and it's not good. But Tadis, he takes the bull by the horns and in charge of trying to make sure that they stay out of our STAs, they get treated if they're in our STAs, and keep them functional. Because if they overtake an STA, the flow pass offline for a year, it's a real problem. And he's been doing a great job of keeping it going. He's in charge of organizing all the crews, getting all the materials, making sure everything's surveyed, and really getting out there and getting those work orders done and getting those crews in there, even planting afterwards. If we need to do that, Tadis is there. He runs that shop. And he does a great job of it. I mean, Lawrence talks about, oh, we got a new exotic, and it's got all these challenges. And there's Tadis. Tadis, we got problems, and he's right on top of it. And I'm happy to report, I looked at it yesterday, our STAs are performing really well. We're seeing good water quality starting to come out of those STAs, and it is because of Tadis's effort, right? If you didn't take care of these exotics, it would be a real problem. Tadis, that is why you are our January Employee of the Month. All right, our January 2024 Team of the Month, this one's a big one too, and deservedly so, is our Sea Level Rise and Flood Resiliency Plan team, consisting of Madahel Ansar, Cassandra Armstrong, Matthew Bondolio, Ryan Brown, Christine Carlson, Tom Colios, Lucine Dadrian, Tebebe Desalegny, Mark Elsner, June Han, James Harmon, Candida Heater, Alexandra Hofart, Bradley Jackson, Phyllis Klarman, Peter Kwiatkowski, Carolina Moran, Miriam Mashayeki, Julie Maytok, Vijay Mishra, Akin Owosina, Leroy Rogers, Fred Sklar, 2023 Employee of the Year Lisette Sori, Sandra Smith, Marcy Zender, Hong Ying Zhou, and some contract support from Dave Colangelo, Francisco Pina, Nicole Cortez, Kareen Smith, and Pramod Pandey. Now, why is this team so big? Is because our resiliency plan is huge. 300-plus pages in our resiliency plan because it contains a lot of information that this team pulled together. It includes our assessments of our system. It includes where we are against sea level rise, how can we adapt, what are the projects necessary for the adaptation, and it includes many, many very good projects that really underpin all of our efforts to address the resiliency of our system. In fact, all this work went into a lot of grant applications. We had 12 Resiliency Florida grants, 3 NOAA grants, and 1 FEMA grant, and it has generated $170 million to help us address our resiliency challenges. The technical science is renowned. The evaluation and community engagement is robust, and everybody in South Florida supports our resiliency plan, and it's because of this team that they do that. Congratulations. This is the January Team of the Month.
Good job on all those names.
Oh, my gosh.
That's, you could get Employee of the Month for that. Mario.
Okay, on to February. Our February 2024 Employee of the Month is John Slingerland, Field Operations Maintenance Supervisor at the West Palm Field Station. Now, John has a leadership role and is very pivotal to managing our fleet. And we have a very diverse fleet at the South Florida Water Management District, from heavy equipment to just your sedan, to your airboats, to all kinds of needs that we have to manage our lands and make sure our operations keep going. And John is one of the most resilient people I know in managing fleet, because it is a challenge at the Water Management District. Our fleets are getting old, but he knows how to balance the old vehicles with the new to make sure that there isn't something that we can't get done, right? And so, and he's always on top of trying to do it. He's a mechanic too. He'll get in there and sling the wrench himself to make sure this keeps going. And he's got a difficult job right now. Supply chain is tough. Getting parts is tough, but he's creative and he tries to get it done, and he keeps us going as we try to get our fleet back in shape. It's really John Slingerland is right there front and center to try to get it done. And we've got a lot of work to do, and our fleet is very much central to getting that job done, and John is there to make sure it doesn't stall out. Little fleet joke there. Congratulations, February Employee of the Month. All right. Our February 2024 Team of the Month is our Infrastructure Map Team. So, that is Ken Chen, Dan Cotter, Sulin Kirkland, Heather Kostura, Jill Margolius, Miriam Mashiecki, Libby Pigman, Madeline Rinka, Jennifer Sorentru, and Dina St. Andrew, our Infrastructure Map Team. Now, We have 2,175 miles of canals, 2,130 miles of levees, 915 water control structures, 620 project culverts, and 85 pump stations. And they need to be put in this map accurately, and that takes a lot of back and forth. It took more than a year to get this thing done because you've got to get it right when you put it out there on the street. And getting the lines where they need to be, getting the structures where they need to be, getting the names right. There's a lot that goes into that. And this team did all the back and forth, worked on it day and night, and let me tell you, this is our most popular product. You know, you put it on the table, it goes like hotcakes. And so we really needed to update it. They got to work and they got it done, and that is why they're our February 2024 Team of the Month.
You're probably good. I would like a pen. Congratulations. You, okay, congratulations. Hey, good to see you. Congratulations. You're welcome. Congratulations.
All right, let's get into some service awards. We have a 25-year service award that goes to Shiyong Lin, IT developer specialist in our IT department. Now, we all know that IT support is critical to us getting our jobs done, and Shiyong came to us 25 years ago and went straight into IT modeling support. And I talk frequently about all the modeling support that we do and the modeling that we do to underpin so many decisions at the Water Management District. And that would not happen without the help of Shiyong helping with that support. He's been doing that for many years, first in getting the quality right, getting the processing right, making sure the models run, but also very importantly, post-processing model outputs. When a model puts out information, it's just a bunch of numbers. And you can't do anything with it until you post-process those numbers into decision-making forms. I have seen poor post-processing before I came to the district. With good post-processing, you can make good decisions, and Shiyong is there to help us do that with the data that we have coming out of our models, which is extensive. He's also, beyond the model, he's been helping us with many things, personnel time allocation. So he's out of IT, so there's so many IT systems we have. Personnel time allocations, the procurement calendar, the water supply and planning budget system, the statewide model management system, and the DB Hydro browser are all things that he's been working on for us. He has 2 master's degrees in geodetic science and applied mathematics, and has an extensive scientific background to not only take the IT knowledge he has, but to apply it to our mission itself. Shiyong is known for his customer service. He's there for us all the time, and we really, really appreciate your 25 years of service, Shiyong. All right, we have another 25-year service award for Kimberly Nisp, Legal Administrative Assistant in our Office of Counsel. So Kimberly came to us 25 years ago and went into administrative resource assistant, and she rose through the ranks to where she now is in charge of a bunch of lawyers. No. So she has served 30 attorneys and 2 general counsels, doing all of the legal support for regulation, real estate, procurement, budget, labor and employment, and litigation. And not only does she help with all the legal stuff, she also organizes the general counsel office with calendars and paper planning and records management is what you call it. And in fact, she's our part-time records manager in the Office of Counsel. And I see Kimberly almost every day because she sits right next to Mary Cruz. And it's that friendly face, right? She's always eager and wants to help anybody that's near her. And she's just pleasant to be around in the office all the time. And she has a saying, basically, it's all good. And when she uses that saying, it kind of shifts the room, right? It's like, yes, it is all good. Kimberly, thanks for being here. But the importance of Kimberly, I can only summarize in a lawyer joke, right? I got to do a lawyer joke. Basically, a legal assistant, a paralegal, and a lawyer are walking across the parking lot going to lunch, right? And they come across a bottle, and they rub it, and a genie comes out, okay? And the genie comes out and says, all right, I got 3 wishes. There's 3 of you. You each get 1 wish. So it looks at the legal assistant. What would you like? The legal assistant says, I want to be in the Bahamas on a speedboat enjoying the waves. Okay? And poof, off she goes. Then at the paralegal, I want to be in Hawaii on the beach with a drink, enjoying the sunshine. Poof, off he goes. And then turns to the lawyer and says, what would you like? I would like both of them back after lunch. That is the importance of Kimberly, and that summarizes how much we enjoy her. Thank you for your 25 years, Kimberly. All right. We have a 30-year service award. Robert Shuford, Lead Scientist, Ecosystem Restoration and Planning. Robert. So Robert came to us 30 years ago and went straight into our nutrient removal project for the Everglades. And he's been doing that well ever since. He's a scientist by training with both a bachelor's and a master's, and he is absolutely passionate about nutrient removal and protecting the Everglades, and because he's been doing it for 30 years. And over the last 12 years, he's focused on the environmental restoration efforts specific to restoration strategies. In fact, John and I started a strike team for the STAs about a year ago and put Robert in charge of managing that strike team. Because we want to make sure that when the Q-Bell lands, we can meet it, right? And so Robert organizes that team, brings the materials to those meetings, which happen very frequently, and brings us up to speed, plans future projects, plans different things, because he's right there in the center of it, always helping organize us when it comes to our stormwater treatment areas. And then your restoration strategies update you get every month, he's the one that puts that together. Robert's kind of the centerpiece there. So on the side, he chairs the Board of Trustees and is the Minister of Music at his church. He also is a state college professor and a mentor promoting College Path for Youth. He presides over his national fraternity for his alma mater, and he helps the disadvantaged with free meals. But really around the district, when you come across Robert, he's got that smile, that beam, that and he's just happy to see you, right? And therefore, he's been termed the mayor, right? He's certainly the mayor of the third floor because he's always happy to see you. He's always engaged in that conversation. And it's, you might remember, he presented a poster at the SFER open house, and he was excited to talk about that thing, whoever walked up. It's just Robert. So, thanks for your 30 years of service, Mayor Shuford. And that's a wrap.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bartlett. Like the records show that Mr. Bergeron, Mr. Martinez, and Ms. Meads are here now. It's really nice to be able to see what a collegial group you get to lead, and it's really nice to see each of the offices come and support their colleagues. That's wonderful, and I hope the 9 million plus people of South Florida realize what a wonderful group they have working for them each and every day. We're going to move now to item 4, which is agenda revisions. Molly, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Mr. Chairman.
Great. We'll go to item 5, which is item abstentions by board members. I'm going to poll the board to see if there are any abstentions. I'll start with Mr. Bergeron. Do you have any abstentions?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Steinley.
I do not.
I have none.
I have
Colonel
none.
Thank you. Ms. Meads?
No, sir.
Mr. Martinez?
None.
I have none.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Vice Chair Wagner?
None.
Thank you. There are no abstentions. And we'll look at the approval for the minutes of the December 14th, 2023 meeting. Does anyone have any changes to that? If not, is there a motion to second?
I'll move to
To
approve.
approve.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Hearing none, we'll call that question. Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Steinley?
Yep.
Colonel Rum?
Yes.
Ms. Meads?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez? Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wagner?
What's that?
Say yes. Would you like to vote for the minutes?
Yes.
Thought so. Thanks, and I'm going to vote yes. That passes unanimously. The Executive Director's report. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few things to update you on. So let's start with the budget process. So we submitted our preliminary budget to the governor and the House and the Senate just this month or in January. And so now we're monitoring the budget process. And I've talked to you before about the governor's budget request, which was quite epic for South Florida and the ecosystems we're trying to restore. He had asked for $664 million in SERP funding to really advance SERP. That's almost 200 more than ever before for advancing and achieving even more now for the Everglades. So that was a lot of money to ask for SERP, and I'm happy to report that the House, so in the budget process in the legislature, there's a subcommittee that puts out the first offer. And then it gets reviewed by both chambers, and eventually in conference, when the chambers get together, that's when they put the final touches on it. So the first offer is never the final offer. So I want to put that forward to begin with. But the House, in their very first offer, matched the governor's budget request. So that was great. Great to see them come forward with that. The Senate's initial offer is $357 million and limited to specific projects. Now, in discussions, we certainly expect that to go up as it moves towards conference. But certainly, I think all the stakeholders are engaging on that effort to make sure that everyone knows the importance of funding the governor's budget request. And not only does it achieve more now, but it's critical for maintaining cost share with the federal government. If we don't maintain cost share with the 50-50 cost share on SERP, the federal government stops, right? They stop building theirs. We always have to stay ahead. And right now, we're neck and neck. With the IAJA funds that they appropriated $1 billion towards SERP, that put us neck and neck with the federal government. And they've got a lot of building to do on their side of the ledger, including the EAA reservoir. So there's a lot of building that they need to do that we need to do building also to keep up with that. So that's the importance of the governor's budget request, is not only to keep us going to achieve more now, but also to make sure the federal government doesn't slow down on their obligations. So we'll keep monitoring that as it goes to conference. That should happen towards the end of February, and early March is when we should see the final budgets come out. In Northern Everglades, the governor asked for $71.5 million. The Senate actually put 10 extra million on that one, and that's the program that we use for improving water quality for Lake Okeechobee, Caloosahatchee Estuary, and the St. Lucie Estuary. The House is at $31.6 million. There's a lot of stakeholders that rally around Northern Everglades funding, so I imagine with the Senate and the House, they'll probably come together to fully fund Northern Everglades. But we'll keep monitoring that as well. The last thing I wanted to mention was the governor did request $150 million so that we could repair the aging infrastructure of the CNSF system and help contribute towards addressing the sea level rise challenge we have, particularly in Miami and Broward County. That is a very brand new funding request out of the governor. At the subcommittee level, the House didn't put anything in the budget for that request, so we've certainly been talking to them, and DEP's been talking to them about the importance of it. On the Senate side, they put in $75 million, so that's a start. It's certainly not going to get the job done. But they also included proviso to fund basically a Lake Okeechobee ecosystem study focusing on the habitat and health of Lake Okeechobee and how to best manage that. Maybe there's stuff we can do about it, which is a big conversation right now, is the health of Lake Okeechobee. So while they did include some funds, it's nice to know that they acknowledge that need exists there for Lake Okeechobee. So that's kind of the budget update that we have now so far. I'll keep you posted on that. And I really appreciate all the stakeholders that are engaging in this budget process. Those that care about our flood control system, those that care about environment and SERP, they're all very much engaged in this budgeting issue because everyone knows the importance of it. While we sort of talking about Lake Okeechobee, we all know the lake is extremely high right now for this time of year, and it's not good for the ecosystem. And the staff at the Water Management District is very focused on advancing projects that help Lake Okeechobee, whether it's the Northern Everglades projects, whether it's the EAA reservoir, but also Northern Storage. Northern Storage is there to really help Lake Okeechobee. And I'm happy to report that we launched the planning process to do Component A of SERP, which is the Northern Above Ground Reservoir, about a year ago. And right now we stand with the help of the Corps and all the stakeholders through all that public process and some really key contractors to help us pull the information together. We are poised to submit Northern Storage, the Component A of SERP, this month to the Corps for consideration in WRDA 2024. That's a huge accomplishment that this staff pulled together and pulled off. To do a feasibility study in 1 year's time is Herculean, and we did it. And we were very good at engaging the stakeholders. We were very good at getting the science done and putting this project together. And the Corps is ready to receive it. So we look forward to it getting submitted for consideration in WRDA 24. So the lake needs it, right? The lake needs LOCAR. That's a half a foot of water off of Lake Okeechobee. We could use that right now, right? So, and LOCAR is the acronym, Lake Okeechobee Component A Reservoir, right? So we're happy, we're excited that we're able to submit this and get the job done. And by the way, that's the very last reservoir around Lake Okeechobee for those ecosystems in SERP. So let's get it authorized. So, also want to thank the Corps because they were helpful in this process. You know, they did partner with us to do their federal responsibilities with the tribes and the endangered species. All right, I got a little nerdy topic here for you. We are poised and ready to adapt the new standard for measuring elevation, going from NGVD 29, as in 1929, to NAVD 88, as in 1988. This is a accurate way to measure elevation in the state, much more accurate way to measure elevation. And each station is different. You know, you need to do the adjustment to NAVD at each station individually. So this is 10 years in the making, getting the measurements exactly right for every single station to convert to the more accurate system. Now I want to tell you, it's going to say a different number, right? Lake Okeechobee will say a number that is 1.25 feet lower than in GVD, right? The lake level did not change. It's just a different scale. LOSUM will adapt to it. All the regulation schedules will adapt to this new scale, but it's the modern scale. It's used in permitting, it's used in engineering and survey, everywhere. Everybody uses it. It's time to make the conversion. So we've been doing an extremely good and diligent engagement process so that to try to make sure everyone knows that we're not changing the levels. The levels aren't changing. It's just the way they're measured is changing. I imagine there will be people caught off guard. Our websites and everything will be conveyed with both measurements for a time being until people get used to the new levels at whatever gauge they're looking at. So we're hoping to launch that in the near future. Get everything up and convert to this new, more accurate system coming your way. So I want to conclude with some reflections, really. The Colusa hat, you know, since our last meeting was in December, our last business meeting, and since then we've had 2 ribbon cuttings. One was the C43 pump station, and if you got to see it, it's a gorgeous pump station. Nice and shiny and clean. It's beautiful. And it works, and it's ready for that reservoir to be done, which will be next year. But we cut that ribbon, had a lot of great West Coast people there to celebrate that achievement. But the other one is the EAA Reservoir Stormwater Treatment Area. I think I have a slide with some B-roll footage of the event. Yep, go ahead and hit the movie there, Molly. So this reservoir, this stormwater treatment area is a milestone in SERP, right? It is absolutely a piece of the cornerstone project, the EAA Reservoir Project, in the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. It will help lower these high levels in Lake Okeechobee. It will help with water supply. It will help for not only people, but for the environment and the Everglades and Florida Bay. This stormwater treatment area coming online represents one of those achievements that this district has been working for decades, and we were here to see it come to life. And it's just it's a wonderful moment in my life, and it was really a special day for me. I couldn't get the smile off my face. It's a great achievement, and I just wanted to end with that because, you know, achieving more now and doing more now is just a great thing for all of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Bartlett? Thanks. I guess my only comment would be that when we change the measuring system, Sean, if you could reflect that I'm now 6'1" in my bio, that'd be good. Sorry. So now we'll go to public comment. We'll move into our first public comment period. If you're here to comment on a specific agenda item, we ask that you hold your comment until we reach that item on our agenda. This comment period is for general comments not related to agenda items. Public comment for consent agenda item is item 11 on the agenda, and public comment for discussion is item 23. The public had an opportunity to provide written comments prior to this meeting. We did not receive any e-comment. Now we'll go to general public comment.
We'll hear first from Newton Cook, followed by Daniel DeLisi.
Thank you, Newton Cook, United Waterfowlers of Florida. Every time I prepare something to say, it gets stirred up, so I actually have so much I was going to read this because I have to go fast today. But I was out there at that meeting, and I can tell you, I stood there and I listened to the bureaucrats, the governor, Washington, D.C., everybody patting each other on the back about this project. Problem is, this project was planned 20 years ago, and it won't be done to 10 more years. And I have to say I have a problem with people patting each other on the back for something they had nothing to do with the planning on and will not be here when it's finished. As important as that reservoir is and the SDA. And while they're standing there, patting each other on the back, just a little ways up to the north, the same group of agencies are killing Lake Okeechobee. 16 feet. Did you read the article from Scott Martin, who won the tournament with a record number? You know what he said? No problem. The fish are all jammed up in little 5-acre spots on the lake. All you got to do is go there. They're trying desperately to find a place to spawn, and they can't because the friggin' Corps, who just walked out of the room, has got the lake too high, and there's no vegetation. There's no clean water. And we're patting each other on the back. This governing board has been silent. And I'm going to be in front of the FWC next week, and I'm going to give them the same admonition. You are responsible for what's happening, and you will have the legacy of what Lake Okeechobee is 10 to 20 years from now, when the reservoir is done, which will take 6 inches off the lake. 6 inches off the lake would have us at 15.5 feet in the middle of the wet season. Absolutely irrational to purposely destroy with Losum the heart of the Everglades. And that water has got to run out of that lake, and it's going to go to the St. Lucie, and it's going to go to the Caloosahatchee, and it's going to go down into the WCA's. Dirtiest, filthiest, algae-filled water. And that's going to be the legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. We'll hear next from Daniel DeLisi, then we'll move over to our Zoom participants.
It's kind of hard to follow that. I will say, just a note on Newton's comments. If you care about the Caloosahatchee, that littoral shelf, or those marsh areas on the west side of the lake are immensely important, and we don't want to lose that. I think there are a lot of very nervous people on the West Coast and up around Lake Okeechobee that see what's happening to the lake and are very upset with that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm actually, I believe strongly in accountability, but I also believe that if someone does something truly outstanding, they should be recognized for it. And I want to highlight what you all have been doing out on the C43 site for a moment. I had the opportunity to tour the reservoir construction with some of my local government clients on the West Coast, and we were just absolutely amazed. John Cresswell and Sean Waldeck on site with JTEC are just doing a phenomenal job. But it highlights how nimble the district is as a government agency. You know, you'd think a big government bureaucracy like this could not turn on a dime, get rid of a contractor, undertake a project of this scale with the logistics involved. I mean, all the batch plants on site and all of the crews moving equipment, laying down, pouring concrete. There's so much going on that site. To think that this organization can do something like this is just absolutely mind-boggling. It's absolutely amazing. So I just wanted to come and thank you all for that. A lot of people have put a lot of time and a lot of heart and soul into getting this reservoir moving. Myself, there were board members long before me who were advocates for this. But it means nothing if the reservoir's not built. And this is really the only agency that could have done that. You think of other agencies working on Everglades restoration, you couldn't fire a contractor and move forward and not miss a beat and actually improve construction. It just doesn't work that way. So I think to John, there will be a John Mitnick Day over in Lee County sometime, a statue of you and thanks when we crack champagne bottles over the side of that reservoir. But I am just absolutely beside myself with appreciation for everything you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLisi. Moving over to our Zoom participants, we'll hear first from Scott Martin, followed by Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch. Mr. Martin, please unmute your mic.
Hello, thank you all for having me. Thank you, Newton Cook, for the acknowledgement there. Thank you for your passionate cry for Lake Okeechobee. I appreciate everyone's concern. You know, I was very blessed this last week to be able to win the tournament and set records for Lake Okeechobee, but I'm more concerned now than ever for the future of what we're dealing with there on the lake. As we had over 250 people from around the country visiting our beautiful lake, most of them were shocked at the amount of destruction that they saw. They all came to me at the tournament and said how ugly Lake Okeechobee was. What happened to Lake Okeechobee? Why is the water so muddy? Why can't I catch any fish except 2 or 3 places around the lake? And I said, well, it's because we have no submerged vegetation. I said, it's because we're keeping the water too high. At a 16-foot lake is death for the lake. It's an unnatural level that does not allow any vegetation to grow. Some facts that we need to all recognize right now, as we've heard reports of 2,000 acres of submerged vegetation, 1,500 acres of submerged vegetation. I'm here to tell you right now, as someone that's lived on that lake for 40 years, knows every inch of that lake, that we're down to 1 acre of eelgrass on Lake Okeechobee. 1, not 1,000, not 100, 1. That should be alarming to everyone listening right now. And everyone that's responsible for taking care of Lake Okeechobee needs to step up to the plate and start funding projects inside of Lake Okeechobee. As I'm so excited to hear about all the projects east, west, north, and south of the lake that are going to eventually help the lake, but as Newton said, we don't have that time. We're at absolutely DEFCON 0 right now. We have to do something immediately. This funding that the governor's earmarking for Northern Everglades, we need some of that money, a lot of that money, for projects inside the lake. Those projects need to include SAV planting, habitat building and restoration. We have to put this lake in recovery mode. We have to get the lake water out of the lake, allow the vegetation to grow back so it creates a filter. So when the water does go east or west, it's going to be cleaner water. As the gentleman from Fort Myers said, we can't lose that littoral zone on the west coast, the west side of the lake, which we have. There is 0 submerged vegetation on the west side of the lake. I beg everyone here to do something immediately with funding. Do something immediately to help us get projects inside of Lake Okeechobee. This is a natural God-made lake, and no one has the right to destroy it. And we have the responsibility, all of us, to protect this beautiful resource. So I appreciate that. I'm encouraged to hear that
Please
people
wrap
are
up your
recognizing.
comments, Mr. Martin.
I'm appreciative of everyone that's recognizing the issues that we're dealing with, and I just pray that we can all come together and fix this big issue immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Next, we'll hear from Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch, followed by Mark Perry. Ms. Thurlow-Lippisch, please unmute your mic.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It was wonderful to see everyone at the EAA STA ribbon cutting, a very exciting day and amazing that it's been done in 5 years. Also, I'm very concerned because on the most recent periodic scientist call, which was last Tuesday, the Army Corps of Engineers noted that increasing releases are being evaluated. We live in a world where one entity dies as another one recovers, and it is just so frustrating, going back and forth between the estuaries and the lake. Nonetheless, it's almost spawning time and breeding time for all of God's creatures in these estuaries, and they are the nurseries of the ocean. I just ask the district to be strong in being careful with what's coming, and also open and sharing with the public, not being afraid to communicate the good or the bad, but letting people know what's going on. And the true matter here is that the water needs to go south. And we've got a big EAA, agricultural area blocking the situation. And that has to be over time altered, addressed. Also, I will say it because you can't say it. I think it's appalling that the state legislature, the House or the Senate, would not give the full amount for the Central and South Florida plan being brought up to speed. They will really wish they had supported it when we get another 1928 hurricane and people die, because that is an old situation. We're so excited to be building all these new things, but we're not maintaining our home. Shame on them. Give the full amount and more. And I miss you guys. You're doing a great job, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Ms. Thurlow-Lippisch. Next, we'll hear from Mark Perry. Mr. Perry, please unmute your mic.
Yes, thank you, Governing Board. It's Mark Perry, Florida Oceanographic Society. Also, to kind of start off, as co-chair of the Everglades Coalition, I wanted to thank you all for helping to sponsor and support the Everglades Coalition Conference at the end of January. It was just so well attended. We had over 460 participants. We had 10 great panels. We had lots of great speakers and discussion, including ASA, Army, and a lot of great people from Interior. It's just a great forum and format for bringing everybody together and talking through these issues. And I got a lot of compliments on the event and how it pulled together everybody. So thanks again for your support of that. As mentioned, 16.3 feet where the lake stands now. It's been high for many, many months now into the dry season, and we're very, very concerned, obviously, with El Nino event coming down. Finally, there's about 1,400 CFS going south through 354, 351, 352. The problem is that there's finally a lot of the STAs are being overworked. They're all above their normal target levels of 1.5 feet. The inflows are about 125 parts per billion, outflows at 21 parts per billion on an average. But we have 1.2 million acre feet since water year 2024 started going through the STAs, and only 8,600 acre feet from Lake Okeechobee headed south through the STAs. So it's very inequality there to how much basin runoff from the EAA is going through and filling up the water conservation areas and taking up all the capacity for sending that lake water south. We really, really need to come up with, ask you all to figure out a plan for more storage and treatment. I know we have the EAA storage reservoir coming on, but it's not going to be for several years before it's online. We got to come up with some other plan to have a water control plan in the EAA that's better to store and treat that water before it goes through the STAs, allowing capacity for lake water to go south. When, especially during these kind of times when we need to be sending it south, in jeopardy of sending it east and west once we get a higher than the 16.3. I know the Corps is very nervous about releasing this water. So let's do whatever we can to try to look at how many different options we have to put that water south, including storing and treating it within the EAA under different water control measures. So thank you for this time to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comments.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you all very much for your comments. We're going to move now to board member comments. We'll start with Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say and I say this a lot, it's a great honor to sit with my fellow board members. And want to compliment Drew with the way you recognize all these employees. It's kind of overwhelming to see, 1,500 strong, committed, talented, managing one of the largest, if not the largest, drainage district in the world. Addressing the largest environmental restoration in the world. What an undertaking for all of us, and it's a great honor for me to be a part of all that. But all of these employees is just, we're so blessed to have the talent, the commitment. Seems like a family, a happy family that really takes pride in themselves. And as a man that runs somewhere around 60 companies myself, I've always noticed people that take pride in themselves is extremely important. I want to thank the governor for being in the EAA and celebrating the online stormwater treatment. Another step forward in progress to move clean water south. Extremely important. I do share the concerns with Newton Cook, and I really respect Newton, but we can't give up. We have to stay focused. We're very blessed, and I want to thank our governor and our legislators and our federal partners. We've been very blessed to move forward, I think, with approaching 70 different projects under the last 4 or 5 years that's been completed. Moving forward, I do have concerns, like everybody. The lake levels are very high. I know Area 2 is way above schedule. We have a lot of water in this system. If you go back to 1948, when our forefathers drew a line and addressing agriculture development, setting aside where we live today with safety and welfare to the general public and the ability for people to live in South Florida. Move forward 52 years. We are now addressing, and we're 24 years in, to correct mistakes of the past and appreciate and recognize that the journey of water is the life of Florida. From sawgrass to seagrass, the most important resource on the planet. So as we continue to move forward, I think, and you've all heard me say this, if you can send someone to the moon in a rocket ship, I think we can accomplish this for a quality of life for future generations. I want to compliment our staff for recognizing the importance of the Tamiami Trail. We have looked at all of the barriers, missing links to getting the benefit of $1 billion worth of infrastructure that's been built many years ago. The bridges, 3.6 miles, the 333 North, that really wasn't even supposed to start till about 2026, completed based upon this agency recognizing we can't move water south without that infrastructure. So as we continue to go forward, and I'll talk a little more when we get into our water condition area about the importance of the Tamiami Trail and what our staff is doing to make sure we can move water south. You know, it's extremely important to lower the lake, to keep the Central Everglades with compatible water levels with the plant communities and the wildlife, and get water to Florida Bay, stop seagrass from dying, everything that you're working on. When that connection, and we're about 1.5 years to maybe 2 years, and I'm sure, John, you'll give us an update. I know y'all had a meeting, I think, with DOT in regards to us being able to move that water south, minimize the discharges out the Caloosahatchee, the St. Lucie, the Indian River Lagoon, and move water south is extremely important. And I want to thank you, Drew, for your leadership. You must have stayed up all night to be able to pronounce all those names. There's no way I could do it, I can tell you. But I will have more to say when we get in the area of moving water south down at the trail when John's doing his presentation. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Steinle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll save my comments and questions for most of them for the meeting, but I want to, as everybody is previous to me has said, I want to express the privilege I felt to be involved with the EAA-STA ribbon cutting, and acknowledge that, you know, we stand on the shoulders of so many people that have worked on this prior, and the progress we've made is a result of their work. It's a result of the support that we've received from the governor and the momentum he's helped maintain on these projects. And it makes me so proud to see a government agency accomplish something so quickly. Now, the planning took a while, but the actual build, when we look relative to other projects of its size, is just a tremendous accomplishment. So thank you to everybody and staff for being involved with that. You know, there's clearly going to be some difficult decisions that have to be made with regard to lake levels. I think all of us acknowledge the harm that the lake has experienced based on high waters. I'd love to, and I hope we have the opportunity during this meeting to hear from the Army Corps and have a discussion around, you know, options and conditions and everything, but I'll save that for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steinle. Colonel Roman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to piggyback on what my fellow board member said about the EAA STA ribbon cutting. What a wonderful event it was. It was a great day. It wasn't too cold. It wasn't too hot. It was almost picturesque and perfect for that occasion. And Sean, you and your team, and especially Jill Margulis, who did the heavy lifting with that, and her team, thank you so much for a first-class event. The one item that I want to share with the board in addition to my comments about the ribbon cutting event, is that my concern for Lake Okeechobee. And as you know, earlier, or really last year now, I went out on Lake Okeechobee with Scott Martin and Hendry County Commissioner Raymond Iglesias to take a look at the lake and to hear their concerns firsthand. And during that trip, we did a little brainstorming. And as you'll recall, I reached out to James Erskine for FWC and also the Corps and talked with them about the possibilities of what we could take a look at in terms of a pilot project. Well, I wanted to update you on my recent visit that I had earlier this month, where I traveled to Clewiston and went out on Lake O with a follow-up visit with Hendry County Commissioner Raymond Iglesias. Scott was fishing in the tournament, so congratulations, Scott, but I missed you on the boat. And we had a team from FWC. And I'd like to tell you who from FWC was with me on this trip, because I think it's significant to appreciate the level of visibility and understanding that we have with this issue. First of all, Tom Reinert, the FWC South Regional Director, was on the boat. James Erskine, FWC Everglades Coordinator. Matt Stevens, the FWC Research Biologist for Lake Okeechobee. Beecham First, Biological Administrator for FWC's Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Section. Alyssa Jordan, FWC Aquatic Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Section, Fisheries and Wildlife Biological Scientist. Now that's a title. And Kobe Krieger was kind enough to drive the boat, and he's a professional tournament angler and sales manager for Roland and Marianne Martin's Marina and Resort. I had with me from the district Libby Pigman and Dr. Zach Welch from our Lake and River Ecology section. Talk about heavy hitters with a lot of expertise. That boat was chocked full. And it was a listening session for several hours. We went out through Clewiston Lock and into the area of Coot Bay. And we were looking and discussing the lake's condition, and how we can maybe get a pilot project off the ground to address some of the lake, the health of the lake in a smaller scale. You know, obviously, we can't take the whole lake on, okay? It's just too big and it's too complex, and right now it's basically a reservoir. It's being used as a reservoir to a large degree. So we were looking at how could we maybe do something on a smaller scale and possibly incorporate wave attenuation devices through a section of that area and get us an area that we could really work with and begin our knowledge base on how we could maybe get started with that, improving the health. So we discussed these options. We continued the discussion through lunch. I really have to send a big shout out to FWC. Talk about a team of folks who really cared about the lake. They were listening. They were really committed to seeing what we could do. I felt very positive about that engagement. And I really feel optimistic and hopeful that we can get at least a small pilot project on the ground by the end of the year. And that's kind of ambitious, I know, but I'd like to really see what we can do by then. So the next steps where we are in this is there's a interagency working group that's going with FWC, and they have representatives, I'm sure, from a lot of groups and the agencies, and they're going to take a look at what could be a possibility for a pilot project, and maybe up to 3,000 feet for a pilot model, linear feet for wave attenuation devices that might be able to be used for a section. So that's where we are. I'm looking forward to seeing what the interagency working group comes back with. But I felt a firm commitment from the FWC group. I mean, they care. And I learned so much about the fishing and the fisheries. And in addition, I learned about the tournament. I saw where the boats were clustered. And there weren't any fishermen around us in Coot Bay that day, which was a statement in and of itself. So I think it's real, and some of these comments, I know folks have been around a long time, and they've been talking about the health of the lake. There's not many options. That's why more storage is important. But I do feel optimistic about getting a pilot model off the ground and seeing what we can do with that. Also, I would like to thank Mark Elsner and his team. Naples City Council had a workshop on water supply and also notifications for shortages. And we were invited, as the district was invited, to come and to talk about all of that and to explain it to the Naples City Council during a workshop. And I want to thank Mark and his team. They did a tremendous job. There was a lot of engagement and a lot of interest in understanding that better in light of the Cape Coral warnings not too far from you, Chauncey. In speaking of Mark and also Dr. Carolina Moran, I think there's an opportunity here as we go forward to take a look at our permitting in light of sea level rise. There's a couple of things that have evolved. I know I mentioned this before, and we don't want to get out in front of other agencies, but, you know, our water use criteria, we track chlorides, and the way we test chlorides isn't necessarily uniform, as I understand it, so we might want to take a look at that in that side, and also environmental resource permitting in terms of climate change and sea level rise. Mark and I had a session where we were going over, for my benefit, so I could understand it better, I called it Water 101. And when I was looking at the saltwater intrusion and as it was coming through the coast, and he was helping me understand the dynamics of the aquifers better, you know, it seemed to me that there's some opportunities here with these two things that we might be able to do in-house and to address in light of climate change and sea level rise. So I'll leave that for whatever it's worth. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Meads?
Let's see what to talk about first. So Newton, hey Newton. Newton, you're absolutely right. Back patting and chest thumping, that's the way it works. And I remember that there was once a vice president of the United States who took credit for creating the internet. Remember that? If I'm wrong, somebody, you know, help me with that. I'm sorry, but that's my memory. And that's just the way it goes. That's human nature, and that doesn't bother me a bit. I don't fight against people's human natures. I just accept that. I can tell you that on this board, as you know, we all know, we've been up here for 5 years. We are unpaid bureaucrats, which means that we aren't here for the power, I think. We aren't here for the money. We are here for the love of these things, and we feel the importance of these things. And that's why we love to hear from you, Newton. And we lose sleep just as you do, and we worry just as you do, and we hold ourselves very much accountable. And I want to thank you for your comments. They're always helpful, Newton. I was scheduled to be at both the Everglades conference and also the ribbon cutting for the EAA and the STAs, and I just couldn't be there. It was out of my control. But I will tell you that you're all invited to come to my home sometimes. Let's just have a big meal. And you will find that there will be a gigantic picture, that ribbon cutting picture, where I'm the only one not there. But because of the miracle of electronics, when you come to my house, you will find me in that picture, because I am going to insert myself, because I was not there physically, but I was there in my heart. Thank you.
Mr. Martinez.
Just real quickly, again, echo what everybody has said about the ribbon cutting event for the STA at the AA Reservoir. Congratulations to everybody from the actual event, which was very, very well done. A lot of people, and well deserved, because as I drove up, and it was a long drive to get to where the tent was and the ceremony took place, but it was really cool because it gave you an idea of how vast that project is and how beautiful it was and how, you know, well done everything was. And then when the pumps all went on, which we saw now in the slide, in the video, it was just a really, really cool experience. And, you know, the fact that we got that done deserved the great event that took place. So again, congrats to everybody from Drew, Sean, as always, you know, all the logistics were right on point, and everybody across the board, the whole agency. Congratulations. It was a great job, great project, and a great event.
Thanks. Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To begin with, Colonel Roman, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for pulling the groups together on Lake Okeechobee. Been kind of following along with what you've been doing there. Wanted to visit with you about it so many times, but I can't. No, thank you for your leadership. And just hearing you talk today, it reminds me of a quote that, not a quote, but it's one of those things that, one of those isms that my grandfather taught me. And taught his dad, and dad taught me. And it had more to do with money management, but I think it is relative in this case, in Lake Okeechobee case also. And it's that, son, if you take care of your pennies, if you watch your pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And as long as we're taking care, and with your leadership there, it feels like some little things, you know, 300 yards of wave attenuation, 300 yards? 3,000 yards, 3,000 feet. 3,000 feet, 1,000 yards of wave attenuation, try to protect some SAV. You know, the legislature putting a few dollars in, hopefully earmarking some dollars for some project on Lake Okeechobee. It's encouraging. You know, that ism that, you know, watch the pennies, dollars take care of themselves. Well, that's the reason we have these ribbon cuttings, is to help keep those dollars moving. The dollar projects, the big reservoir storage projects, 6 inches with EAA reservoir, the STA ribbon cutting certainly, you know, yeah, pumping our chest a little bit, but it's not pumping our chest, it's trying to keep the motivation so we keep these projects moving, keep the dollars flowing, and I kudos to the district for a great EAA STA ribbon cutting. You know, the other dollars, the low-car, man, a year. Do that 203 study in a year. You know, we talk about, somebody mentioned 20 years of planning. That was a year of planning on a reservoir that, you know, kind of, you know, hopefully you can get it built that quick. So, you know, it's on you, Drew. Hopefully Congress, hopefully we get that thing approved, we get money, you know, we get legislature to appropriate money to get that thing, get low-car moving. Also encouraged to hear that the district continues to move forward with our ASR science plan. You know, watching the well drilling rigs at the L60, which canal is that there east of town, L63? L63. Watching that continue to move, hearing that we got the pilot study that the water treatment plant, that's still moving forward. Again, these are inches off of Lake Okeechobee, but it's the dollars that eventually it will get better. But we've got to, you can't lose the infrastructure. You can't lose the economics within the cities that depend upon Lake Okeechobee, the lakeside communities. We've got to keep finding these little ways to keep the fishery alive. And I was, when I heard Scott with his 20-pound defeat over the next closest competitor in the fishing tournament, I mean, 90 pounds versus, I think the next closest was 70 pounds, on some experts. But I was like, oh God, this tells me Lake Okeechobee's on fire. But when you dig into it, you understand that hopefully it's not a last gasp, but it is a gasp. And, the analogy wasn't used, but shooting fish out of a barrel. I mean, that's, hopefully with your leadership, thank you for the leadership again there, Colonel Roman, and hopefully we can keep things moving. I do want to thank Ray Palmer. I think we all got new district ownership maps up here at the dais, and appreciate the update there from Ray and his staff. Also, I want to give kudos to the district for their leadership on Kissimmee River headwaters. Thank you for stepping up and doing the open houses that you did. Libby, your team, excellent job. I got to attend the first open house over in Haines City, Hatchnahaw. I got to meet some people that I've talked to on the phone, but just never met in person, and had some great discussions, great open discussions. And I think once people get there, they see what's happening with headwaters, the raising of Lake Kissimmee to provide more storage for Kissimmee River restoration. They begin to understand what's going on. But getting that out, having that open dialogue, before the Corps gets into a NEPA meeting, it's just so important. And it's Drew, under this leadership, that's become a kind of a standard with your team, is communicating these things before we get into the official government process and allowing people to have their comment. And I think that is, I appreciate what his staff has done there, what y'all have done. I think it is so important to allow people, because, we live it every day. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know what was going on. I mean, it's just, so I can understand. So with that, and, I will make one little comment on Lower Kissimmee Basin STA. That same process, I encourage EIP to step up and continue to engage with the locals. Mr. Madrigal was here in December. He still hadn't heard from EIP. So, I just got to say it right now. EIP needs to reach out to Mr. Madrigal and some of the neighbors as they continue to go forward with this process. Everglades Coalition, I appreciate the invite. What a nice turnout. I was triple booked that weekend, but I did get to attend one of the sessions there at EVCO, and the session on conservation. And had several folks there on the panel, and but the one, Mr. Showman himself, Jim Strickland. If you haven't met Jim Strickland, he's a cattleman from over in Manatee County. He'll laugh when he hears me call him a showman, but he does a good job. But to hear him talk about conservation and the importance of how some of our open spaces and ranch lands fit into the Everglades, fit into conservation, and preservation of our state. Jim got all but a standing O at Everglades Coalition Conference. So that was, and I know a lot of us, I saw several of us there watching that session. I really appreciated that session. With that, that's my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Vice Chair Wagner.
No comment today, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll wrap up and just echo what everyone has said. A little bit about our ribbon cuttings. I understand Mr. Newton Cook's concern, but I don't think it's incongruous for us to to be celebrating at the same time we know we have a problem on the lake, because I do think it's important to get the stakeholders together at these ribbon cuttings. And I attended 3 last month, and it's great conversation. It's good for a lot of our elected officials to be able to see these projects on the ground. They've heard about them. Most of them have never been on the site, and most of them, when they come on these sites, are just blown away at how big they are and how beautiful they are. And I think it's really important for them to see that, because that's something they're going to remember their whole lives. And so I think the ribbon cuttings are absolutely worthwhile. Plus, they're choreographed beautifully. Sean and your team, thank you for pulling that off. And Ms. Meads, you may not have been there, but you were certainly there in our hearts. And we missed you. And I'm glad you were able to use AI to Photoshop that in there. You probably. As far as the health of Lake O goes, it's something that's very much on my mind. I think it's on all of our minds. Mr. DeLisi hit on it, and everyone on the West Coast, and I'm sure on the East Coast knows that the lake is too full right now. I'm glad that, Drew, the 203 study that you were able to expedite, I appreciate that. Expedite seems to be our mantra, and that's needed, because this LOCAR needs to be finished, and we need to have northern storage. And WRDA 24 is going through. I hope that FGCU's study maybe can help you, Colonel Roman, with the interagency work that you're speaking of on the lake. They've got great scientists and super smart people there, and put them together with FWC and our group, and I think that we can hopefully make some progress on that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I plan to do that.
Great, thanks. And one of the ribbon cuttings that Drew didn't mention that we had a chance to attend was the Lee County Caloosahatchee interconnect, and that's between the city of Fort Myers and the city of Cape Coral. And it's not a terribly sexy project, but I think it is in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the longest pipe under a river, which I don't know how that works, but for the engineers, they do, which is important. And basically, it's connecting a wastewater treatment plant in Fort Myers to the city of Cape Coral, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States right now. So it's a good project for all of Southwest Florida, and it's definitely going to help the river out and help out our communities there. And I thank the district for being involved with that. That's my comments, and we'll move now to consent agenda. If any board member want to move any items on the consent agenda to discussion. Seeing none, we'll move now to public comment on consent.
Mr. Chairman, we have one public comment on consent. Caitlin Newcamp. We also have one hand raised on Zoom.
Good morning, governing board members. Good to see you all last month at the event and the coalition conference. Audubon, we want to just touch on item number 17 on the consent agenda. We are very supportive of the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Program. It's critical to meet water quality standards in 3 watersheds, the St. Lucie, the Caloosahatchee, and Lake Okeechobee. And it supports the overall ecological health of the Everglades system. So NEEP is an innovative approach to obtain water storage by utilizing public-private partnerships for dispersed water management. These projects can range in size and impact, but they get us closer towards reaching our 900,000 to 1.3 million acre-feet storage target. And these efforts minimize harmful discharges into the northern estuaries and subsequent algal blooms while creating a healthier ecosystem overall by reducing discharges by 20%. Not only that, but they provide financial benefits to the landowners. They're a water resource during the dry season, and they protect communities during wet weather events as well. Given all this, it's clear that Audubon is supportive of the NEEP program, and we know that the current projects listed are working and they do have benefit. So thank you for your efforts to that end. However, we would just like to suggest that an expanded and more strategic approach going forward is helpful. So we know that private land must be utilized to reach our north of the lake storage goals, and it's all the more obvious now with the lake being extremely high. And we do think that targeting the best locations with modeling and planning would be more effective. So we are here to support the district, FDACS, and DEP on this partnership as you develop agile plans for determining the most impactful additional land for dispersed water management projects. And when we know we are targeting the most beneficial tracks for water quality and quantity, we can be more assured that NEEP is working and we can reach our goals much quicker. So please let us know how Audubon can help you all in criteria development for determining future storage projects for a robust watershed protection plan. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Newcamp. We'll hear next from Brad Cornell on Zoom. Mr. Cornell, please unmute your mic.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Governing Board members. This is Brad Cornell. I'm here on behalf of Audubon Western Everglades, and I wanted to address consent agenda item number 18, which is the mowing contract for Hendry and Palm Beach counties on 6,100 acres. Audubon Western Everglades recognizes the need to prevent erosion and stabilize sloped canal banks and right-of-ways. However, Audubon Western Everglades encourages the district to consider exploring alternatives to turf grass that use native vegetation and ground covers that support pollinators and provide some important habitat values. This touches also on a wider issue of a big opportunity which the South Florida Water Management District has to promote conversion of turf grass to native plants in urban areas, especially. In addition to habitat value, there are significant water conservation benefits from reducing irrigation. This is a vital component of all your water supply plans. Thank you for considering making these habitat values and water conservation opportunities a priority of the district. We encourage you to continue to consider that as you look at this mowing contract. Thanks very much. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comments on this item.
Thank you, and thank you all for your comments. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion by any board member? Ms. Meets?
I have a quick discussion. You knew it was coming, right? Okay, so Valentine's Day is Wednesday. That started because of the card and candy industry. But it gives us an opportunity to think about the things we love. It's also Ash Wednesday, so that helps. And I love Lila. I love a lot of things, but I love Lila, and I'm grateful for the funding that is in the consent agenda for Lila. Thank you, staff. And for those of you who are going to learn to love Lila like I do, or even more, I'm going to just talk for 2 minutes about Lila. It was, planning takes a long time. I don't know when the planning on Lila started, but the construction started in 2002. And as the scientific method goes, and we all were taught that in school, once you start an experiment, a lot of times when you think you're done, you're only beginning. You find things along the way that then you take and apply, and you think you understand what's going to happen, but we don't. And we are surprised, and that brings me to the beauty and the majesty of Lila. Lila is the Loxahatchee Impoundment Landscape Assessment Program, and it is the primary source of information for SEP North and elevated vegetative hammock features. Incredibly important to restoration, incredibly important to the health of our conservation areas, incredibly, incredibly important to the Mississauga Indian tribe. And after these 30 years, now it's time to take what we've learned and expand that and learn more, apply it, and bring it to fruition. I can't say it, but it takes money. And I want to challenge our board $186,000 of this project has, current project in the consent agenda has come from ad valorem taxes. And I'm so very grateful because you know how money is. Talk to the Senate. And then, I love the Senate, by the way. They're part of my loves. And then $93,000 has come from the Land Acquisition Trust Fund and Everglades License Tag Revenue Program. And that money is really super important for the funding of Lila's learnings and explorations of the future. Go see this place, it's incredible. So I would like to challenge the board. I don't know if any of you have license plates that fund this program, but it's very important, and as leaders who care, I'd like to challenge you that maybe next month, when I pull into governing board spots, I will proudly have my license plate, and so will you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Meach. Do you think we can actually get DMV within a month?
I know you can. You
All
can
right.
do it in an hour.
All right.
Just come to my part of town.
Okay. The board is challenged. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call that question. Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Steinle?
Yes.
Colonel Roman?
Yes.
Ms. Meads?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez? Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wagner?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to vote yes, and that passes unanimously. So that takes care of consent, and we'll move next to discussion agenda. And we've got a professional engineering service contract with Lucene.
Sorry. Hello, Mr. Chairman and fellow board members. I will be presenting the outcome of our request for proposals for the professional engineering services contracts. Based on Florida's Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act, known as CCNA, public entities hiring professionals who provide engineering, architecture, surveying, mapping, and landscape architecture services are required to compete using a specific qualifications-based selection process. It is for that reason the district advertises a request for proposals for professional engineering services to execute work order contracts with consultants. This allows the district to issue work orders for engineering services in an expedited manner. These contracts are for large-scale complex restoration and O&M type projects. Some examples include the EAA Reservoir Inflow Pump Station, the C-2324 South Reservoir, C-25 Reservoir and STA, the C-111 South Date Pump Stations S332B and C, and S99A Pump Station refurbishment. This is to name a few of the types of work that we would do under this type of contract. So the current professional engineering services contracts are expiring in May of this year. These contracts provide the district with consulting teams, providing a full array of engineering services from concept, planning, engineering design, and construction oversight. Full services include land and in-water surveys, geotechnical drilling and design, environmental permitting support, modeling, engineering design for ready-to-advertise construction projects, engineering during construction services, as well as construction management services. So I wanted to walk through our process. The RFP was issued with legal requirements of CCNA, and as a government entity, we are required to allow the public to view the entire decision-making process and not just the final decision. So based on Sunshine Law, the evaluation committee can't speak to each other regarding the solicitation unless in an open forum at a publicly noticed meeting. There were 5 committee members chosen. They were from engineering, construction, modeling, and resiliency. So walking through the process, we prepare a request for proposal and select evaluation committee members. Then we advertise these requests for proposals, RFPs, and procurement is our single point of contact for this throughout this entire process. A publicly noticed pre-proposal meeting is held here in the auditorium with consultants to answer questions in the public and discuss the process. Then we have a consultant inquiry period where questions are submitted directly to procurement, and we issue an addendum that provides the responses to those questions back to the consultants. So then consultants submit their proposals on a specified date, and we move into an evaluation period. And those 5 committee members start off with an evaluation committee kickoff meeting held to define the committee rules of conduct, evaluation process, and compliance with the Sunshine Law. Evaluation committee reviews those consultant proposals, scores them online based on criteria set forth in the RFP, and a publicly noticed meeting is held with the committee to review the summation of the written scores to determine a short list for oral presentations. So this sends us into a second evaluation period with oral presentations of the shortlisted firms. And those presentations are audio recorded. And then the evaluation committee completes their scoring online and of those presentations. A second publicly noticed meeting is held with the evaluation committee to review the summation of written and oral scores as ranked by each evaluator for determining the final ranking and selection of firms, and then provide a recommendation to the board for award consideration. So that's our process. So following this process, the district issued a request for proposals on September 13th, an inquiry period from September 13th through the 28th. An addendum was issued on October 3rd with answers to those questions that were submitted by consultants to procurement. And we received 27 proposals on October 13th. 27 of those firms were evaluated based on how they would successfully deliver a project, and the evaluation committee shortlisted 24 firms based on overall written proposal scores during a publicly noticed meeting on November 15th. Oral presentations were held from December 6th through the 7th, and scores were submitted online by the team, by the committee. At a publicly noticed meeting, the evaluation committee discussed the scores, rankings, and determined that 17 of the consultants would be chosen to move forward for consideration for contract award at this board. Their decision and recommendation was based on a break in the scores as well as the future volume of work over the next 5 years. And volume of work, the objective in CCNA is to equitably distribute contracts among qualified firms, provided this distribution does not violate the principle of selection of the most highly qualified firms. So this is the final breakdown from the original 27 submitted, 24 shortlisted for oral presentations, and then the final ranking and selection of the following 17 firms. After your consideration for approval, procurement will proceed with negotiating the hourly rate fee schedules to execute the work order contracts. The previous contracts had a total of contract authority of $475 million. To date, we have encumbered $382 million. So originally, back in 2019, the board approved $225 million. We came back in 2022 and increased $125, and then again in 2023 for another $125. This was amended twice. So the decision to go with 500 was looking forward at the body of work that we have in place, as well as inflation and increase in rates over time, and the amount of work that we have coming down the pike that's included in our 5-year capital improvement program. So for your consideration, here's the resolution to issue 3-year contracts with the option of 2 one-year extensions to 17 firms for a total amount not to exceed $500 million, subject to successful negotiations.
Thanks. Do we have any public comment on this?
We have none, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any board comment or discussion on this? Mr. Martinez?
Yes, hi, Lucene.
Hi.
So when a project comes up for you all to decide, okay, let's get one of these engineering companies to do it, do you have these 17 names on a wheel per se? And it's like, okay, this one's up, we're engineer A is due, we're gonna give it to him? or how do you do that selection?
So there's a few things that are considered. One is the ranking. Two is the quantity of work that they may already have with the district. Number three, if they were already the engineer of record, they would get the engineering during construction work.
Okay.
So those are things that we consider. We also look at, some companies have expertise in certain areas, so we look for that as well. So there's many considerations in regards to awarding work.
Okay, so you evaluate it, and based on each individual project, obviously, if it's an ongoing project, that makes sense for you to stay with the one you've been using, but if it's a new one, I guess I would have a little bit of concern is, as you're saying, that criteria that you just mentioned, you might have 4 or 5, right, that fall in line and meet that criteria. Well, how do you select out of those 4 or 5 and make sure that maybe 1 or 2 don't always get preferential treatment? So, and I guess as a follow-up to that, what I would at least ask is that, for example, at the last time, something like this, you were just saying it ended up being at 425 million, right? I mean, I think I would like to see, maybe when this one is up and you come up for the next one, that you give us a summary of each of these companies and what the total amount of contract, the amount of dollars that each of these companies have. And I think just as a board, we got to make sure, because it's what we hear, right, from some of these companies, well, Company A, Lucent A really likes Company A, for whatever reason, so she always prefers that, and obviously I don't believe that, but just to make sure that we're safeguarded from that, again, that maybe next year when you come up for the 24-25, and you request the money then, that you give us a summary of what's happened with these 500.
Thank you. So I would like to add that online on the external face of our web, procurement posts the tally of work in regards to dollar amounts that each firm has for both the large and the small contracts. So that's online, open to the public.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you, that takes care of it.
And then I'll add one more item. Sometimes we take the next 3 that are in line and we ask them for proposals. And the proposal is based on how would you deliver this project to us. It has nothing to do with cost because rates have been negotiated when the contracts were executed. So we ask for how would you deliver this, and we look at what they wrote up and what we think is the best path forward on that write-up. So that we do that at times as well.
And if I can, I'd also just like to chime in and clarify for Mr. Martinez and the other board members. As Lucene said, the assignments are available online. It's a public record. We can delineate what firms of the existing contracts and how much work each one of them has gotten, and we will do the exact same for this series of contracts. But Mr. Martinez, you had said when we come back in 24 and 25, again, we won't be coming back in 24, 25. This action before the board is to authorize up to $500 million of work. And the board would not have a action before them until we approach that $500 million, just to be clear.
Because it says here for the year 23-24 budget.
What-
I'm sorry, whenever the 500 is done.
Right. So what does come back before the board is the budget, the annual budget that you're used to seeing for the past 5 years. And there will be dollar values on individual projects that will tap into this authority, but it's not line itemed out to firms, so to speak.
Mr. Stein?
So Chairman, I'm not trying to stymie our comments. I just would like to move to approve and get that out of the way.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Second. I have a second. For discussion, I'm assuming, Mr. Steinley?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. You had a comment?
Lucene, thanks for all of this. What would you say the percentage of continuing contracts are a part of this? In other words, a continuation of jobs that are being done currently?
So the projects that have existing work orders, they expire in May.
In May?
So we would start new work orders for that same work, probably 70% right now.
Would a good portion of this amount, 500 million, be consumed by existing work orders that are continuing?
No, I don't think we'll.
Okay.
No.
So the majority or so is new projects?
Correct.
To be done. And then, in terms of selection, you're approving at the umbrella level, I guess, the firms that you could work with. You then go into, so if negotiations are successful or unsuccessful, that would consist of what? You then, after this, you go into a fee negotiation?
Correct.
Okay.
So that is done by procurement. They negotiate the hourly rates based on the job titles. The consultants are required to submit overhead, et cetera, and how they come up with that rate. So that's done by procurement, and if we can't come to a consensus on that negotiation, we don't have to execute a work order.
Then that 17 could drop down?
Correct.
Or that company stays within the list of 17?
If we can't negotiate, which we've never had that situation that I can remember, then they would just drop out.
Okay. And how much flexibility do you have beyond pricing? You might have just answered this, to select a service provider. In other words, if you've got a service provider that is more expensive than the other 16, but has done a project of similar work specifics, and done them very well and done them on time, and the district has generally been happy with the workflow, do you have authority to choose them over the less expensive option?
So I'll again start with, we go in order of the ranking, and then we look at if the body of work that they have in place, and if they have too much work, then we would move on to the next one. Then we look at, can that company do the job? Or do we need to ask like the next 3 in line for proposals? So we look at a variety of things, but we don't, they're not, there's no negative on the fact that one has a higher rate than the other. We
Okay.
don't look at that. We do put our scopes of work together. We submit them to the consultant. They come back with a level of effort, meaning how many hours and what resources. Is it a chief? Is it a lead? Is it a entry-level position? And what's their mix? So we have room to negotiate on the hours that they've put on the job, as well as who they're putting on the job. And we know who we want in regards to like the level of effort and the product we need to get out of that specific scope of work. So that's what we negotiate.
I guess I just want to make sure that you're not pressured to always choose the lowest cost provider. I'm hearing that that's not the case. You can choose the best provider, taking into account those other factors. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and
All right.
keeping, and I think John was probably going to jump in, so I'll jump in before him, but Jay, these are not jobs that are in essence put out to bid for a number, contractual number. I'll give you a very basic example. Let's say at the STA, we want them to go out there and do some construction management or watch the job being done. And they'll submit and they'll say, okay, we can put an engineering 1 and engineering 2 for 20 hours a week. And so, well, they already have the rate that they're going to pay anyone. All these 17 companies are going to get paid the same for an engineering 1 per hour and engineering 2 per hour. Now, what Lucinea and her team might come back and say, you know what? We don't need them for 20 hours. Give them to us for 10 hours or 5 hours the engineering 1. So that's where they play with this. Is that pretty accurate, John, Lucinea?
Yes, it is. So, Mr. Steinle, the goal is always to provide as equitable distribution of work as possible, while at the same time providing the maximum benefit to the taxpayer. And that benefit comes in not only in the price that you pay for that service, but also in the quality of that product that you receive. So those are things that we weigh back and forth as we think of an individual job in those assignments. And to directly answer your question, yes, we have that kind of flexibility.
Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Mr. Bergeron.
John, these contracts is, do you have an engineer's estimate kind of on the scope of work this is a time and material negotiations by the hour?
No, no, it is not a time and material in the sense that you're thinking of it. It is a level of effort, as Lucinet described. You pick the level of the individual or the experience of the individual to perform a task, and how much their hourly rate is, the number of hours that they takes to perform that. So in other words, I'm not going to pay you, sir, $1,000 an hour to go make copies or get coffee and do CAD drawings and those kinds of things. I'm going to pick someone that has maybe 5 years of experience instead of the 30 plus that you have, and pay them a lower hourly rate, and they'll get it done faster. Those kinds of things is what we go through.
So do you have a general estimate on the amount of hours for the task? Do you have an upset bar that you're dealing with here?
So I'll say we start with an initial conceptual cost of a project. So when we first decide we're going to move forward on a project, we have to put together kind of an idea. What are we going to build? What are we going to do? Let's put that conceptual cost. There is a rule of thumb. Percentage could range anywhere from like 6 to 10%, or, depending on the project size. Sometimes the larger the project, that percentage goes down. You don't always get 10%, but I don't look at percentage. We use the percentage to say, are we within the ballpark? But that's step one, to make, in case you have quotes that are higher than that, right? But we do know approximately how many hours does it take to put per plan sheet, that type of thing. We have those types of estimates. And we have reviewers that do that, whether it's the geotech side of it, the survey gets reviewed for cost and ballpark numbers that everybody has in regards to all these different types of services. But in general, the level of effort and how long it takes, we have those types of ballpark numbers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got one quick question. This is more for the record than anything else. In the past, I think you said 5 years ago, or around there, you asked for 225. For this, you're now asking for 500, which is a lot. It's $500 million. That's supposed to get us over the next 5 years, presumably.
That's correct.
And you decided to do that in one fell swoop rather than to come back to us. And I was wondering if you could just explain that logic.
So with that ballpark of 10% of engineering costs of construction, we have a 5-year capital improvement plan of about $5 billion. So that ballpark will help see us through those 5 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call the question. Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Steinle?
Yes.
Colonel Roman?
Yes.
Ms. Meads?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wagner?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to vote yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Lucinet. Next on the agenda is technical reports. We have Mr. Mitnick and Mr. Glenn.
All right, morning. As the chairman said, we're going to quickly run through the water conditions and ecological report for the board. So looking back at the rainfall, you can see so far the month of February, we've gotten some rain, but looking back at the month of January there, just a little bit more than average rain, just slightly above average rain. So looking at how that rain fell across the district, you can see primarily it was in the northern basins up here north of Lake Okeechobee. Overall, for the month of January, it was just slightly above normal rainfall, but that's fun with math, so to speak. You can see that some of these basins up here got well above average rainfall, but then when you average it out with some of the southern basins, it only becomes slightly above average. So just be aware of that when people start looking at these overall totals. It's averaged throughout the entire water management district in all of the 16 counties. But you can see the spatial distribution of where the rain fell was very different north of the lake versus south of the lake. So looking so far for the dry season in total, since about October 1st, again, you see somewhat of a similar pattern with the least amount of rainfall being here in eastern Palm Beach County, the most being over on the southwest coast in Upper Kissimmee, along with, quite surprisingly, down here, Everglades National Park. And I'm sure Lawrence will touch on that a little bit when he gets to his Florida Bay portion of the ecological report and how much all of that direct rainfall over the park has helped Florida Bay and its salinity conditions. So looking at lake levels, starting in the upper chain, up here in the top right, East Lake Toho has been following down this solid red line is the regulation schedule for the lakes. And then you'll start to see these dotted red lines on the district's various hydrographs. That is a recession line that we tend to follow during this time of year during the dry season. So the point behind it being is by June 1st, you've got to get down to this point to make room for those wet season rains. Instead of just bumping along across the top of the schedule and then taking a rapid recession, we sort of even it out, and it's better for the ecology, and in particular the snail kites that may be nesting in those lakes. And again, I'm sure Lawrence will touch on some of that during his presentation. So down here on West Lake, similar, we're following that recession line, trying to get down here to its summer pool by June 1st. Lake Kissimmee, you can see, had a rapid increase earlier in the year. And then the Water Management District, in conjunction with the Corps of Engineers, implemented some operations to start bringing that stage down. There's been a lot of discussion between the two agencies over the past 30 days over Lake Kissimmee. You are all aware that following the hurricanes and excessive rains last year, there was a failure of the S69 weir at the bottom of the restored reaches. The Corps of Engineers had done some temporary repairs to that structure, but now they're getting ready to, in the beginning of March, to start a more permanent repair of that structure. Because that structure sits in the flowway, in the Kissimmee River, there's obviously, as you would expect, you can't do that repair underwater. So we are implementing operations to try to prepare the site for the upcoming construction. And the Commander Booth and Colonel Booth has prioritized that construction effort. So we're implementing operational changes along the river to ensure a successful completion of that construction and repair of that facility. So as you see, that's part of the recession in Kissimmee that's coming down. This dotted line going across is not a recession line, so to speak, as I described over here in East Lake and West Lake, but rather this is a construction deviation that is in place to allow for Lake Kissimmee to hold a little bit more water in this zone in here between the solid and dotted lines, so as to not have it to flow down on that construction project and ensure a successful completion of that construction effort. But it's something that the two agencies have been, as I said, talking a lot about over the last 30 days or so on how best to manage those flows given the other regional conditions and regional priorities, as you'll see as we go through the rest of the presentation. So with that, Lawrence?
Surely. So with that, you see in the upper figure there that the 30, there's 3,000 CFS on average coming down the last week. So we're pushing that water out of Lake Kissimmee, trying to make conditions, get that lake in a place where it is good, while you can then work on the U-shaped weir at the bottom. So there's flow that's coming out, but what that does for the floodplain, I don't know if so my pointer over here, you see that the floodplain is inundated. So once you get above that red line, that red dotted line, which is about 1,400 CFS, you start to get floodplain inundation. So the floodplain is inundated. It's been inundated for about 20 days. That does create habitat for wintering waterfowl that are coming by, and wading birds as well. And you see that when we have these large releases that are sudden, we get this drop in dissolved oxygen. Fortunately, during the cold winter months, it's not as big of an issue because cold water holds more oxygen than hot water does. So we're well above that 2 milligram per liter threshold that we worry about stress on fish. And this is what the difference in discharge looks like. In that middle frame, you see a month ago we had 800 CFS coming down. Now we have 3,400 CFS, so it really pushes a lot of water out onto the floodplain. That's what the restoration project is intended for, is to be able to push water when we do have these high discharges out into the floodplain. How long that water stays there depends on how much benefit you're going to get out of that water being there from an ecological standpoint and when it's there. So we'll have to see how this plays out on how long this is going to last. I think the basic premise is we're going to push a pretty large volume out in the next month to prepare for having lower discharges to be able to work in the dry. So we're not going to get that protracted floodplain wetland, but there will be benefit to wintering waterfowl during the interim.
All right, so jumping down a little bit further in the system, looking at Lake Okeechobee. By now, I hope that the board is used to seeing these kinds of graphics. You've been seeing them for about 5 years now. Over there on the left-hand side is projections for Lake Okeechobee through the district's dynamic position analysis, the DPA, for LORS 2008, which is the existing regulation schedule. And then a couple months ago, I introduced you to this one over here on the right. That is still a work in progress. It's a draft tool that's under development, but it would represent what the dynamic position analysis would project out if the current schedule was LOSUM, represented by that PA 25 model run that was developed during the formulation of LOSUM. So the next slide, and I'll click on it in a second, I want to introduce you to a new tool that your staff has been working on. So as I said, these two graphics are representative of the dynamic position analysis. Staff has also been working on something called a conditional position analysis. So the difference between the two is the dynamic position analysis forecasts future stages based on historical rainfall, what has happened in the past. The idea behind the conditional position analysis is to improve upon that, but look out farther into the future based on climate forecasts for the future, specifically the climate prediction centers, which I always present to you every month towards the end of the presentation. So it's going out to the CPC and looking at what their forecasts are for the next several months throughout the year, and then using that information to develop the rainfall patterns instead of just using what happened historically in the month of March or April or May, but what is the CPC actually calling for this month, this March, this April, this May, and then coming up with the projections as you go out in time. And again, just the difference between the two graphics, this is the current regulation schedule, LORS 2008, and what that projection would look like if you used the entire up to amounts that LORS calls for. And right now today, for where the lake stage is, LORS would be calling for 4,000 cubic feet per second going to the Caloosahatchee, and I think 1,800 cubic feet per second going to the St. Lucie. So if you did that full amount, this is what the projection would end up being. This one over here is what LOSUM would look like if LOSUM was the adopted regulation schedule at this point in time. So I think over the next several months, and even through the wet season, I'll continue to show you both the DPA, the dynamic position analysis, and the CPA, the conditional position analysis, but at some point in time, probably within the next year, I'll transition over to just providing the CPA. All of it will still be available for the public on our website if people want to jump back and forth between the two. But for the board presentations, I'll eventually start moving more towards the CPA as it's reflective. It's more reflective of the conditions that you would expect to experience in the upcoming months as you deliberate the issues that you have to deliberate.
John, did you say, sorry, just quick question. Did you say the CPA includes the expected releases to the estuaries?
It includes the up to amounts of whatever the schedule. So for, on the left-hand side here, it would use the entire up to amount. As today for Lore's 08, as I said, is 4,000 and 1,800. So those lines would be reflected if you implemented 4,000 and 1,800 and used the entire up to amount.
Would that be at 79 or at the lake?
Under Lore's
It would be at the
2008,
lake.
it is at 77 at the
77.
lake. Under LOSUM, it would be at 79, and in this entire yellow zone in D, it would be 2,000 CFS. It's not until you get up into B and C, this sort of light blue area at the top, that it would be higher.
So,
Yes, Mr. Butler.
so no historical in the CPA, no historical rainfall in that model?
Only in the sense that it is where you are. That's the starting point. That's what got you to where you are, is that historical rainfall. But going forward, it's based on Climate Prediction Center's
So like, hook
projections.
this thing up to your brain, like to run this model, or how does that work when it comes to flexibility?
So I
Or
tried.
Are we hooking up to Colonel's brain, or how does that work?
I tried to avoid reading the third bullet there, that is very technical, but that gets into how the CPA is done. And of course, as you know, your staff, we have got a huge PowerPoint presentation that runs through the minutia and the ins and outs of how the conditional position analysis works. And I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and go through it.
All right, one more question. When are you changing the datums?
Oh, as Drew said, I mean, the datum's currently in the district SCADA system, the supervisory control and data acquisition system that we use to run all of our infrastructure. It's already switched over. And what we are reporting out to everybody is just both datums, as Drew described earlier. But our internal computer systems have already switched over.
Okay.
And we're reporting both datums.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around when this thing changes, and yeah.
So looking at water flows, you can see here, inflows to Lake Okeechobee have been about 1.7 million acre feet so far since May 1st of 2023. Releases and discharges to the Caloosahatchee in total have been about 1.3 million acre feet, with about 400,000 acre feet or so having originated back in Lake Okeechobee. On the East Coast, you have about 133, close to 134,000 acre feet in the Fort Pierce area to the Intercoastal Waterway there, and roughly just a little bit less than 200,000 acre feet coming out of C-23-24 canals into the St. Lucie estuary, and just less than 9,000 acre feet from the C-44 basin, and 0 from Lake Okeechobee itself going to the St. Lucie estuary. And Lawrence?
So when we take a look at the water depth compared to the stage envelope, you see that we are approaching, 2016 was the highest it's been during the dry season. And you look over to the left and you see that we've had an increase in stage over the past month. So we are, in a place where when you look at how much do we typically recede on the lake in any given year, it's typically about 2.5 to 3 feet from where we are now till you hit the beginning of the wet season. So where that would put us, would be if you follow that gray line for 2016, you're going to end up at about 13.5, barring no more large rain events and inflows. We've had a lot of discussion in here of what if we were in a recovery year. So we've talked about, what are the triggers if you have lake stages as high for so long, you have this lower amount of STA, you would want to go into recovery for the lake. But it is trumped by, if you are going into an El Nino, you don't go into recovery because you're trying to get, you're just be fighting a losing battle trying to get water out of the lake when more water is coming in than regular. So, but I put the recovery envelope on here. So the recovery envelope is about a half a foot. It just shifts that down a half a foot to show you where you would like to be and for the duration of where you would like to be. So we're definitely, you know, in my estimation, I don't think we will get there in this next year because of where we are currently. But that is what you would want to see if you were trying to recover the SAV throughout the lake, which is at a very low acreage currently. So I just wanted y'all to see what we would want to go to, what the ecology of the lake requires or wants when we have had high water years in succession, and then we need that lower year for germination and maintenance and growth of SAV in the lake.
Were there damaging discharges in 16 and 17? I know 18, but 16 and 17? 16 was a discharge year. And how quickly did from the highs of 2016 to then the lows of 2017, did you see significant improvement in SAV habitat pretty immediately, or did it take years?
It's usually a multi-season, so you have one season that kicks it off, and if you can have another good season behind it, then that's when you really start to see it. Unless you've had a really low year and you have a very slow refill, that allows for growth of submerged aquatic vegetation all the way up that slope. And we had that in 1 year. I don't recall it offhand, but that condition doesn't happen very often.
Lawrence, do you have any concern that the conditions are any different today? In other words, we're at high stages, we've seen this before. Obviously, there's a lot more recovery when you get to this level of damage. But is there any concern from, on your side that the lake can recover, given the right conditions? Is there any, is there any permanent damage that we're accruing right now?
When I talk to the lake scientists, the lake is pretty resilient. If conditions are there, then it can recover. And we're talking really from an SAV standpoint. And if it's going to be a multi-year process for recovery, I mean, I think if we had 2 years, one low year followed by a year within the envelope, you're going to start to see that recovery because plant growth is pretty quickly. All it needs is light, nutrients, and the proper water depth for it to grow. So those conditions can be achieved if the stage is appropriate. Coming and looking at inflows, John mentioned this. So basically, with what's coming in and what's going out, we have over the last week, evapotranspiration is really helping us out. So you have 2,300 CFS going out of the lake just with evapotranspiration. So that's helping a lot to where we're only in a differential of 900 CFS compared to what's coming in to what's going out. Looking at the Lake Okeechobee cyano bloom distribution and intensity and what we're seeing currently is there are small blooms that are occurring. We do sampling through the winter months. It's reduced, but we are not seeing any toxin production. We are not seeing any dominant species there. So there's really no concern right now about algal blooms on the lake, and temperatures are also low, which is something that keeps the toxin forming bacteria from forming. But what we do see with large inputs into the lake from runoff is that in that middle category you have dissolved inorganic nitrogen is on the rise. And we know that that is the food for bacteria, cyanobacteria, when waters get warmer, when we get into that growth period. So we're starting to see that increase, and that's something to think about as we move forward when we get into season. Where are we going to be, and what will we be doing relative to discharges when there are algal blooms on the lake? We do surveys looking at wading bird foraging. The previous in December and January, those numbers were not within the 5-year interquartile range, but we're back in it in February. So that's a good thing. There's about 1,300 birds we're seeing foraging on the lake, but if you look over at this HSI over here, which is the Habitat Suitability Index, what this does is it says, relative to depth, I would rather be in this light blue. That's the best for wading birds, and you don't see a lot of it because it's so deep. But it's interesting in that you have this sharp decline around February, and I was speaking to the bird biologist and saying, what's up with that? And they're like, well, they forage for a bit and they start focusing on nesting, and then after they've constructed their nests, they go back to foraging again. So we're in that kind of lull where they're home building, and then soon they're going to be going out looking for groceries. There he is. He was talking to us earlier, and he just won the St. Croix Bassmaster this beginning of February. 90 pounds of fish, a record. So in bass fishing tournaments, you go out for a day, you have a 5-bag limit. So over these 3 days, Scott caught 15 fish, weighed 90 pounds. Do the math at 6 pounds per fish. Those two were caught the last day, 9-pound bass, 2 9-pound bass. When Scott says he knows the lake, he knows the lake. Listen to him, he does, he knows the lake. And you see this and you look at it, and the average observer is going to say, the bass fishery is in really good shape. But you have to look at the demographics behind the bass fishery to say, where are we? And anytime you're looking at population demographics, you're looking at how many babies are being born, how many of those babies are surviving to the reproductive age, and then how many of your older population is being sustained. And depending on those ratios, you're either growing if your babies and your early matures are really on the increase, and you're not if that's low and your older population is there. So we're going to look at that in terms of the bass fishery over here. And you've got length of a fish. When you get to about here at about 20 centimeters, that's called young of the year. So that's the newly spawned fish. And then between about 20 and about 20, almost 30, these are the age 1 fish. And then above that, these are adults. These are the ones that are reproducing. So you've got babies, early teenagers, and adults. So when you look at this, you're trying to figure out what is happening with this dynamic and where are we? And if you look at the red year, 2015, you have a pretty decent amount of reproduction going on. You have a pretty sizable amount of age 1 or teenagers out there. And you've got a lot of adults that are out there that can keep spawning and creating new fish. You look at 2020, and it's equivalent to the numbers that were produced, but then it's definitely decreased as to the ones that have been able to recruit into the reproductive population. So now you're getting production, but you're not getting the sustaining factor that you need to keep that population whole, correct? And then we come to 2022 and we see that there's low production, there's low recruitment, and that's where the concern is for stakeholders that say, what is going on with the bass fishery? So the bass fishery is definitely, what does it need? It needs SAV. In order for these younger guys to recruit into this population, they have to survive. Survival for fish is growing to a size where I can't be eaten. The ability to do that is hiding. Basically, you're trying to hide in an SAV, you're trying to stay out of where the predators are, and without that SAV, that is the concern about what is going on with the bass fishery. So if the bass fishery continues on this decline, you see over here, This is catch per unit effort. You're out, the FWC is out electrofishing. So they will push a pedal on a thing, it'll shock the water, they'll scoop it up, doesn't hurt the fish, don't worry. They get them, they measure them, they look at them, they put them back in. So you see these years where we'll have years where we have really good recruitment, and that's what happened in 2020. We had a lot of babies born, but we'd had poor recruitment into the population of adults. So you see these trends that go down, then you have a good year, but wow, they didn't really recruit, so we're coming back down again. So if we don't get SAV growing in the lake before those older fish begin to die out of the population, then you can have a population crash. Luckily, we have a pretty good amount of those adult fish. The bass tournament just showed you that there are large adults out there, but they're not going to wait forever. So, you know, when I talk about when we need to have SAV in the lake, it's next year is going to be difficult. The year after that would, in my mind, be a recovery year. You know, we would need that recovery year absolutely if we're going to sustain the bass fishery in Lake Okeechobee. Looking at the St. Lucie, you see that there are, the dark blue up here is when you have releases from the lake, and there have been none since April. I've had large rain events within the basin. What that's done for the past month is it's really freshened up the both tributaries into the estuary proper. But you've seen a nice rebound in salinity here for adult oysters into the optimal range, which is good. Here's the data that we're collecting, I think, that are going to become really useful through time on what's going on with reproduction within the estuaries. So currently you have, you know, where are the zooplankton and the phytoplankton? What is actually being produced in the estuary? And if you go over here and you look, and here's the different areas, all of these are this part. So you don't see a lot of production going on at all right now in the North Fork and the South Fork of the estuary. Most of that production that is occurring is more towards the mouth of the estuary. You've heard stakeholders saying, we're concerned about releases and when releases are going to come. But the Army Corps is contemplating releases. But this shows, you've heard stakeholders say, we're concerned about when reproduction is coming. You don't want those high discharge events, because what you would do is you would push these newly spawned zooplankton that want that freshwater condition, you would push them out into a higher saline condition where they don't want to be. So if you were to look at this now and you were to say, when would discharges be best from an ecological standpoint? Now, there's no reproduction going on. So that's something to contemplate as stakeholders get together and say what's going on, that they're exactly right, and that you do it, it would be best to do it prior to the peak of the reproductive cycle in the estuaries, which is going to start in March, but it's going to be in full swing at the end of March. So that kind of some information to think about as those conversations come to bear. Same thing on the Caloosahatchee side, lots of rain, and we are actually starting to get water out of the lake through this side. With that increase in discharge, you see that the freshwater portion has come pretty much all the way down to Cape Coral. But when you look over here at Shell Point and the end of the estuary, Shell Point is smack dab in the middle of the beneficial target range for adult oysters.
All right, so looking at the stormwater treatment areas, you heard a comment earlier in the public comments about the amount of water that's gone into the STAs already this year. So over here on the far right-hand side, you can see there's been about 1.2 million acre feet have already gone through the stormwater treatment areas this water year. That's in the top 10 of all these different water years for the amount of volume treated by the stormwater treatment areas. And yes, the vast majority of that has been due to the runoff to the STAs, due to all the rainfall that we've talked about already earlier on in the presentation. We have as also noted in the public comment earlier today, we've already started moving higher volumes of water from Lake Okeechobee through the stormwater treatment areas as that capacity is opened up. And we will continue to do that for the remainder of the dry season as the conservation areas start to come down, and you'll see that next after Lawrence talks a little bit more about the stormwater treatment areas.
So as John mentioned, we have 1.2 million acre feet that have already gone through the STAs at this point in time. Last year and the year before, that was at 900. So you can see there's a pretty substantial increase because of El Nino of what is going through the stormwater treatment areas, and that's due to runoff. Drew mentioned earlier that performance is looking really good. STA 1 and East and 1 West had a lot of construction, a lot of refurbishment going on in the past couple of years, and so we are seeing a trending down in those numbers. STA 2 is at 15. STA 3-4 is at 13. That's Q-Bell. That's great. STA 5-6 is at 38. A couple months ago, it was in the 50s. So we're seeing that start to trend down as well. So the work that the crews have been doing, and Tadis, shout out to Tadis for getting in there and doing all this work. We're seeing that work. We're seeing the benefits behind what we've been doing through restoration strategies and what we've been doing through our refurbishment projects. As you go in through it STA by STA, you see that everything except for the eastern flowway over in in STA 1 East is operational. This area right now is in dry down because of erosion that occurred during the hurricane. So this is a short circuit that you don't want to have in an STA. You don't want a preferential flow path. You want a flow path that's being sheet flow going across all that vegetation, so you have that good uptake of phosphorus. And so we're doing a lot of construction in there currently to make sure that we can get this replanted. Remember, all the replanting goes by hand, so it's a time-consumptive process, but it's super important in regenerating the health of that STA, so when it comes back online, it'll be ready to perform well. And then looking at STA 5, 6, and 3-4, you see everything is online. 3-4, currently, here's Tadis again, and thank you, Tadis, but what we've seen is in the inflow canal that is up here at the header of all these, we have that floated crested heart again, and we're trying to get in there, and he has crews out there that are working on it so we're not going to push that exotic into the STAs, and once that is complete, we'll be able to have a greater capacity for flow through 3-4. So remember that when we take lake water and put it through the STAs, we're putting it through STA 2 and 3-4. That is a flow path that takes it into the Water Conservation Area 3. It's the more of the historic flow path. We don't use 1 East and 1 West really for lake water.
All right, so looking how water's moved around so far this water year around the southern portion of the system, you can see right here there's been about 1.7 million acre feet have flowed into the conservation areas, both from the north, the east, and the west. I think that it was a couple board meetings ago up in Osceola County, I ran through all the water that is in the Everglades right now, and the vast majority of that is that direct rainfall, but the 1.7 million acre feet does attribute a portion of that, and as a result of all of that water that is in the Everglades, and on the next slide I'll show you the different stages through time. Down here at the bottom into Everglades National Park, inclusive of some of this return seepage over here on the side, on the eastern side of the park, there's been about almost 1.7 million acre feet have moved into Everglades National Park, in addition to all that rainfall that I showed on the earlier graphic. So I think over the last several months, we have been moving a significant amount of water into Everglades National Park with our partners, the Corps of Engineers, and the deviation that they have put in place to allow the S12A and B to stay open, as well as the 343 A and B structures over here on the western side. For flows off to the intercoastal from the lower east coast here, in total, it's been about 2.8 million acre feet, and about 1.7 million acre feet of that has been here going into Biscayne Bay from the urbanized areas along the lower east coast. So looking at each of the conservation areas in a little bit more detail, up here on the upper right, Conservation Area 1, you can see had started the year off well above schedule. The Corps of Engineers had implemented operations and started moving water from Area 1 down into Area 2 to start bringing that down. We have also been moving water out of this structure right here down the Hillsborough Canal going to tide through the urbanized lower east coast. As of right now, the Corps of Engineers has significantly reduced the S10 structures that move water from 1 into 2, but we are still continuing to move water to tide through the Hillsborough Canal out of Area 1. The reason for that being is we're trying to limit some of the inflows into Area 2. As you can see, Area 2 here is above schedule. So on Area 2, you see the two lines, a blue and a green line. Right now, for this time of year, the official regulation schedule and water level in Area 2 is dictated by this green line, which is the headwaters of the S11B structure. This blue line represents an average. It's the 217 gauge that is out in the marsh of Area 2 and is more reflective of marsh conditions. For this time of year, the Corps of Engineers looks at this green line as to dictate, how to implement their operational practices. So you can see they had been moving a lot of water early on from Area 2 down into Area 3. They've cut back on those releases, and that's why you see the headwater at that one structure start to increase. But nonetheless, we're still maintaining the recession overall throughout Area 2. At the same time, we'll continue releasing water from this structure right here through the C14 canal going to tide and discharging that water to the intercoastal waterway, getting it out of Area 2 so it does not flow down into Area 3. The intent from the Corps' operations in Area 2 is to still continue a recession of this blue line as dictated by operational changes amongst those structures. So there's probably about a half a foot to 3/4 of a foot of water still in Area 2 that needs to start moving either A, through the system into 3A once it can handle it, or will continue to move water to tide through the lower east coast out of Area 2 to make sure that that recession continues as we go throughout the dry season. So looking over at Area 3, you can see it had been coming down. It was getting really close to regulation schedule there back in January, but that was when we had to start moving with the Corps of Engineers water from Area 2 down into Area 3, and that's that slight little bump that you see as water levels increased in Area 3, but they've once again resumed some of that recession, getting closer back to schedule. So as I mentioned, all of the S12s, 12A, B, C, and D are all open in accordance with the deviation that was put in place. That deviation is to last for 90 days between January 1st of 24 and I think it's July 14th of 2024. So throughout the entire month of January and now into February, those structures have been open. Quick math, you're probably at day 37 or so of that 90 days. So that puts the end of the 90 days, should we not get back to schedule sometime the end of March, generally. If my math is correct, that'll be the end of the 90 days. So we're currently engaging with the Corps on what happens on day 91 if we're not back at schedule. So that's something that we'll be continuing discussions with Mr. Bartlett and the Colonel as we move forward throughout the month of February and look at some of those forecasts that we showed earlier on in the presentation and how to be able to manage Area 3A for the rest of the dry season. Going a little bit farther to the east, the L29 canal, we're still continuing to move water out of 3A through the 333 structures into the L29 canal. It's dictated and has of the criteria of holding it no higher than 8.3 feet NGVD. I'll get you the NAVD next time around. But in consideration of the construction along Tamiami Trail and the need to not impact that roadbed and that construction as Florida DOT progresses along with their project. And to preempt what I'm sure will be Mr. Bergeron's question, because he mentioned it in his public comments earlier in the board meeting, best I can tell from talking to Lucene and other staff, the DOT is scheduled to complete that construction in March of 2026 for road raising of Tamiami Trail. Going a little bit farther down, the C-111 system over here, I believe back in December, I mentioned to the board that we have some failures of the pipes at 332C pump station. I wanted to update you on that progress. We've received all of our approvals from the state and federal level to be able to initiate that repair, and the field station and the construction crews are out there on site right now, removing those discharge pipes and creating an open channel for the pump station. Probably take about 3 to 4 months to get all of that work done. So for the rest of this dry season, the 332C pump station will be offline and will manage whatever inflows to the C-111 system through the other pump stations, 332B and D, as well as 199-200. And should they not be able to minimize any flooding or potential flooding impacts, then we'll continue to transition that water down through the system and out to Card Sound through S197 if need be, but that will be a last resort dependent on rainfall. So with that, thought I'd throw these in there just for fun and give you an idea of what the dynamic position analysis shows for both Area 2A as we move through time and for Area 3A. So for Area 3, I'll start here. You can see we're likely to get back to regulation schedule, hopefully right here in the beginning of March. So we won't come up against that 90-day deadline or that 90-day expiration of the current deviation. But obviously that is all subject to future rainfalls I described earlier in the meeting. This projection is the DPA, the dynamic position analysis, so it accounts for historical rainfall. I did not include in the presentation the conditional one that I just presented to you earlier. Similar thing over in 2A. As I said, we'll continue to manage that recession and try to keep that recession coming down in 2A. 2A is a real balancing act that you've got to work through. This band between just getting below schedule or at schedule and down below the water supply floor is very tight. It's only about a half a foot in there. So you kind of try to thread the needle and get down closer to schedule, but without just having it bottom out and drop down into the water supply floor of the schedule. And Lawrence can talk a little bit more about the ecology in 2A and the significant topographic differences across 2A between the northern end and the southern end and what that means to the ecology. So with that, Lawrence.
Thank you. As we look from the center panel from last month to this month, we're looking at how water depths are changing. And John's talked about water depth decreasing in Water Conservation Area 2, and we want to see that continue. So from the top end of Water Conservation Area 2 to the bottom end of Water Conservation Area 2, there's a large change in topography. So that water is gonna pond in the bottom, and it's going to dry out in the top much more differently than in the other water conservation areas. So it's a harder one to manage because it's small, but has that large topographic difference, whereas 3 has the topographic difference, but it's much larger. So it's 2 is difficult. And John went through the concerns that they have from hitting the water supply floor, but from an ecological standpoint, we want to see 2 continuing to recede. As you look at what's going on within Water Conservation Area 3, you've got, there's not a lot of change. They're still ponding along this side, which has been ponded for a while. And when I get to talking about Tree Island inundations, we'll see how that comes into play. But what I want you to notice is coming into Everglades National Park, you have Lossman Slough has hydrologic connectivity. Shark River Slough has hydrologic connectivity. Taylor Slough has hydrologic connectivity. All of that is really great for the ecology of this part of the system. It's bringing water into that area. We're going to talk about how it's impacting the birds. It's also making water abundant, fresh water abundant in Florida Bay. And those are really good conditions. So as we look at what's going on, these wetter than average conditions are great for food production for wading birds. So down in the coastal region of Florida Bay, I mean, look at all the white dots in here. Those are all birds. There's 10,000 to 14,000 birds that are foraging along the coast. And remember, the re-establishment of the coastal colonies, breeding colonies, is one of the recover performance measures for, are we getting the hydrology right for Everglades? Up in the northern part, I wish the pinks would show up even better. These are all roseate spoonbills, over 1,000 roseate spoonbills foraging in the northern end of Water Conservation Area 3. That's fantastic. We're seeing the great egrets and wood storks and the spoonbills are starting to nest. That's a little late in the season, but they're starting to nest, which is a good thing. We talk about the Alley North colony, and I forgot to put my slide in here, and I apologize for that. But at March 1st, we'd like to be at about 9.5 feet, and we're up at about 11 or so now. We do have a small concern there in that we like that last statement, that a consistent drawdown is necessary. Once you have the prey production, now you need that kind of slow dry down in order to have these areas that are the appropriate wading depth for fish, but also starting to concentrate the prey so that's easier to catch. So for the Alley North colony, the concern is if water depths are too high and don't recede, then you're not going to have that ability for the adults to go grocery shopping for that large colony that can host up to 100,000 wading birds. So where it's interesting in where you are in the system, how much water is there, but then when it starts to recede, because the reproductive biology of wading birds is tied to the time of the year when you would naturally have recession. Where in El Nino, it's different. It's wet, and it's wetter longer. So we're seeing this great production in prey, and they're going to be feeding, but how successful they are going to be in nesting and fledging those young depends on what kind of drawdown we can have that's going to concentrate prey for them. So you'll hear the biologists saying we've got great conditions in Water Conservation Area 3A from a production standpoint. It's just how we're going to recede moving forward will determine on how successful of a reproductive year it is. And that's one of the things that comes into water management. Isn't easy. I mean, you've got systems that need water at certain periods of time and don't want water at certain periods of time. So this is all the science that my team can bring to bear in the decision making on how we're going to look at what are we going to do with Lake Okeechobee, how are we managing the Everglades, what's going on with the estuaries. It's all connected, and it all has water needs at different times of the year that can sometimes be in conflict depending on what the condition is right now. So, but I bring the science to the table so that it can be considered as those decisions are made. We talk about tree islands, and there's 371 tree islands that through the Everglades that we know the elevation of. And when you're looking at these and you're trying to compare them, that middle bullet says that not all of the tree islands are similar. So some, we categorize them into tree islands that are wet for a long period of time during the year, that are basically normal, they're in the middle of the year, and that are dry. So conditions that these wet tree islands are, they have changed in their composition through time because of just how this area has been managed. I'm not saying that wet is a wet island is a great island, but it's an island that is there. It's an island that has already changed because of previous conditions, and we look at what the conditions are per that category. So to keep stammering, I'll go in and I'll show you what we're doing. So a wet island is one that's been inundated. We look at this period of record from 1991 to 2020, and we say it's a wet island if during that period of time it's been inundated for 65 to 90% of the time. So through how the Everglades have been managed through time, before restoration came, you had a lot of drying in some parts where you had soil oxidation and you had lowering of tree islands. Those tree islands are the ones that are going to be wet. They're in an area that is going to have more water in it now than maybe it did historically. And when we look at that, we say, okay, of the 371, 82 of the current wet tree islands are inundated. And you look and you see, well, what type of habitat is that providing? These species have pond apple, they have willow. That is the major type of plant that is on that tree island. Most of the time when you're looking towards a restoration goal, you wouldn't say willow is what you would want to have, but that's what's there currently. And what's really interesting is the Alley North colony, which is 20, it can have 100,000 birds on it. It's a willow-dominated tree island. It's actually a depression in the marsh. It's not a above ground. So tree islands still provide habitat. It's just what type of plants are there and then what type of organisms are going to use that type of vegetation.
While you're
Certainly,
there,
sir.
Some of these tree islands are really Indian mounds that were elevated as far back as 10,000 years ago. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So then you have tree islands that really wasn't, that are not Indian mounds.
Correct.
Actually. So how many of them are, did you say, that are elevated out of the?
So out of the 371, when we get to the next slide, it pretty much gives you I'll go through that in the next time. But in the next slide, I'll explain that. But what Mr. Bergeron is saying is there are tree islands that have formed naturally out there, and then there's one that have been basically formed by the indigenous people that were there previously. But some of those ones that were formed probably are higher, but there's also just topographic difference within the ridge and slough and tree island system, and it's based on changes that have happened before we've started being really focused on restoration. So there's going to be that topographic difference, but all of them are going to have some type of tree vegetation, plant vegetation that is going to provide some sort of habitat for the different organisms that use it. But when we look at the average, and that's if it's been inundated for 25 to 65% of the time, there are a total of 120 averages in the island, and 68% of those have been inundated for longer than 120 days. And then you go to the dry tree islands. That's tree islands that have only been inundated 25% of the time. And there's 169 of those out of the 371, so that's almost half of what we're seeing. These have gumbo limbo, paradise tree on them, and so we are only seeing 2% of these that have been continuously inundated for up to 166 days. But something I want to show you, if you go back and you look at where's the distribution of dry islands compared to the distribution of the average in the wet. Water Conservation Area 3, because it's typically held higher, we've talked about Tamiami Trail, we've talked about how that operations work. That's where the wetter islands are because of just how the system has been managed in the past. So it's interesting where the distribution lies. And then as we go through restoration and we try to get this water right, we hope to see that change and moving more towards from where the wet islands did to what the vegetation types are on the average islands. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Looking at Biscayne Bay, John talked about the amount of water that's coming out through these canals here, and that's where we have a couple of our sensors. And you see that there's been a large spike and it's starting to trend downward, but salinity conditions are good currently within Biscayne Bay. And then going into Florida Bay, John talked about how much rain has been in this lower area, coupled with what we're getting from all that connectivity through Shark River Slough, through Taylor Slough, through Lossman Slough. And you look at the interquartile range and you see the interquartile range does not represent the restoration target, but but it gives us an idea of where salinities have been in the past. So when we are below the interquartile range, we're really starting to approach that restoration target. So when we're below it, it's a good thing, and we're seeing that that is the condition that is occurring currently. We have a lot of water, fresh water, that has come through direct rainfall and also overland flow, so we're seeing really good salinity conditions within Florida Bay.
All right, so for the projections, these are the projections that I talked about earlier that we're using the new tool that I just presented from the Climate Prediction Center. As we move forward from February all the way through May of this year, 2024, you can see they're predicting above average rainfall throughout the water management district. And then the only difference being is the focus changes as we move through the rest of the dry season, to where the focus tends to move a little bit farther to the northern portions of the systems north of Lake Okeechobee. But then, as usual, they typically do, once you get that first month of the wet season there in June, on the bottom left-hand side down here, they always have the equal chances. So one thing that I will mention, because you may be hearing this in other forums and in other arenas, there is a growing indication that the future dry season next year, so we're talking the end of this calendar year into the beginning of 2024, will be more of a La Nina type dry season. So I can tell you from your staff, your meteorologists, and your modelers, we are very, very hesitant to make any future projections that far out. There's this thing called the spring predictability barrier, which essentially means don't bother doing it before the month of May, because it can significantly change and be something different than what it's showing now. But there is a growing trend out in the equatorial Pacific Ocean of warming waters coming up from the bottom and propagating back to the east, or I have that backwards, cooling waters, that would indicate a La Nina-like condition next dry season or the coming dry season. So with that, what I can tell you, this next couple days through the weekend, for anybody who's got a Super Bowl party planned, it looks like you're not going to have any rain. But the following week, too, is likely to be significantly above normal rainfall. So that's the 7 to 14 days from now. And with that, Lawrence and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
No, thank you. Colonel, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I just want to thank you for your report this morning. I think it's still morning. We just went into the afternoon. But especially, Lawrence, how you connected the dots on the bass. I think that's really, really important that we, don't just talk in general terms about the health of Lake Okeechobee, but you can help us as a scientist, understand the relationship with the actual habitat or the habitat loss and the health of the fisheries or whatever it is you have to highlight. So I want to thank you for that.
Mr. Bergeron?
Well, from what I can see with the high water levels in the lake and high water levels in Area 2 of the Central Everglades, we better be doing everything we can, especially there's a prediction of more than average rain. Am I correct, John?
Yeah, in week 2, there's an above average rain. So one thing I'll add to that is, so we're in the El Nino condition right now. Typically, El Nino's highest influence on our weather patterns is in the months of December, January, and February. So hopefully as we go through the month of February, we'll see the influence of El Nino on our area weaken over time. But there is a projection for above average rainfall, and like I said, in the 7 to 14 days window.
Well, I think it's extremely important, whatever avenues we have. We're halfway through the dry season, and the lake is high. Area 2 is high. Area 3 is pretty well close to schedule. but we have to move all that water south and get it beyond the Tamiami Trail. I think we need to start our dialogue with the Corps in regards to this emergency deviation that we've been dealing with for a decade on the closures of the S12 A and B and the 343 A and B and the 344. The real benefits of those gates being open is it doesn't affect the water level in the L29. And matter of fact, if you look at most of the water that's been flowing south over the past few months, most of it's been going through the S12s, 343A and B and 344. That has to do with the constraints that we have on the 8.5, what is that, for 120 days that we can be at 8.5, then we have to drop to 8.3 until the road is completed.
Correct. We've already exceeded that 120 days and we're operating at the 8.3 right now.
Uh-huh. Schedule of the road is to be completed in 2 years, so it's, did you have any conversations with DOT in regards to our plans to move water southwest through these new culverts that I want to compliment our staff for moving forward with that, those culverts to let more water flow southwest naturally by gravity. Any conversations with them on, I thought you were going to meet with them.
So I just want to make sure you're talking about the eastern side over by Loop Road, south of the 343s A and B?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Lucinda, do you have any, or Jennifer?
So currently, we, in regards to design, we're surveying and performing geotech work, and then moving the conversation with the Corps or with DOT will be whether they design and construct or whether we design and construct, but that conversation is still being had.
Okay, because when will we start construction of the 3 culverts that we've designed in the L28?
So we already have a construction contract. We were waiting on the final permit before we can actually put a excavator in the ground.
Mhm.
But the contractor has mobilized, or not mobilized, but we're working on the paperwork and all the submittals to not lose any time while we're waiting on that final permit.
Okay. Well, we've done a lot of great things down there with the 8.5 square mile area seepage wall, where we can move water through Shark River Slough and removing the old Tamiami Trail. I have discussions going on with U.S. Fish and Wildlife regarding the Cape Sable Sparrow to make sure in the next 2 years, as we're able to implement the second stage of modified water delivery, that they have a solution in captive breeding, relocation, where they can relocate, assuming there's any birds there to relocate, because over the last few years, they have documented that they've been exculpated in Zone A, but we still have to have a resolution so we can move water south unrestricted across the whole face of the Tamiami Trail. And I'm always talking about this because that benefits the whole global system is getting water south and less water unnaturally east and west. So I look forward to us continuing to model the Tamiami Trail. I guess we're modeling to get more water southwest of the L28 as well. Am I correct? How are we coming on that, Colonel?
That's the same effort that Lucine was just talking about. And so that's the modeling work that we're doing now as preliminary design, and we're in conversations with both the Corps and with FDOT on how we work together to most efficiently and expeditiously execute that work.
Well, that particular project is a tremendous benefit to the global Everglades and moving water south, so I really appreciate staff moving as quickly as possible with DOT and coming up with a design that we can implement that project. And but I will say that we've been confronted with high water for an awful long time. John, I've been talking to you for 20 years, even back as an FWC commissioner, being the point commissioner over Everglades restoration. 9 out of every 10 years, we're having high water conditions, not only in the lake, but also in the central Everglades. And so I'm excited that we're moving forward. I want to thank staff for pushing this forward to where in the next couple of years, we're really getting the true benefits of a lot of projects we've built over the last decade, including the 3.6 miles of bridges. You have an additional 6 bridges going in now under the contract that's on the trail, and elevating the trail to allow us to get to that second stage of modified water delivery. And due to the leadership of our team here and the Corps, we've got to be removing any obstacles that doesn't allow us to move water south based upon all the equalization of water levels between the central Everglades and the southern Everglades. And I'm really excited that we're getting out ahead, so when that road is elevated, we don't have any other obstacles in our way, that we can send water south for the benefit of the global Everglades. So we'll stay in contact. I'll keep you all informed on the solutions that I talked to Shannon Eskino as well in regards, and I got a commitment from U.S. Fish and Wildlife that the Cape Sable Sparrow will not be an obstacle in implementing modified water delivery. They're going to come up with a solution. And I think we ought to start working on, with the Colonel, in regards to possibly needing the S-12s and 343s extended beyond, you said March 31st, I think?
That's generally, I mean, the 90 days started January 1, so if someone does the quick math, it's right around March 31st.
Well, we ought to start some communication because that's not far off. We have a lot of water to move south, so I look forward to working with you all on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Steinle?
So with regard to the lake, we've heard how the algae bloom conditions are pretty low. We've also heard that the nitrogen is building up for, early wet season potential blooms. We know that there's a window in terms of spawning until, you said, probably mid-March or something?
Mid to end, to the end of March is when it's
Okay.
going to be starting to go gangbusters.
And everything we've just heard from both of you guys is that the system is wet, but we're using as much capacity as we can to move water. So implicit in all of that is that, there could very well be releases. So would it make sense to hear from the Corps or give them the opportunity to talk about that, or is it something that, Drew, how do you?
So they did talk about it on the scientist call earlier this week, and they basically signal that their scientists are looking at, what it would do and what the benefits would be and that kind of stuff, and they sought public feedback on it. So I think, honestly, that's kind of where they are right now, and that's what I've heard. I don't know, Corey, if you've got anything else you want to share?
Good morning. So we're actively looking at, all the conditions in the system to include the S69 repairs on the weir that we have scheduled in the next couple months. Colonel Booth is looking at all options on the table right now, but we're trying to actively engage our stakeholders, both East, West, and the South Florida Water Management District, to make any decisions. Before we make those decisions, we will communicate those to all stakeholders, but we're actively looking at the system in the intermediate stage right now.
Thanks, Major. Yeah, Ms. Meads, Major, one for you?
No, I just get stuck on specifics. So actually looking at what period of time from now until a decision might it take? Do you think?
So
A week?
it depends on flow rate, ma'am. So depending on how large those flows are and the length of those flows will determine the end of the lake's height. So depending on what the colonel chooses as a target, it will kind of dictate the flow rate and then how long that will take, and balancing the estuaries as well from the east and west, and trying to recognize the life there and not to make a huge impact to that without recovering what we can before the season starts in the summer, 1 June being the target.
Oh, so 1 June. Okay, so a decision in March, maybe? I've got to ask. Just probably not.
Within the next several weeks, I think the position will come out. I have a media call scheduled tomorrow with our stakeholders to kind of give our position and how we're looking at the dry season strategy that we came up with late last year, and how we're looking at the system and the current weather conditions that we have, and have to adjust that based on what we're seeing and what we're going to do. So in the next several weeks, depending on what the conditions look like, we may have to start doing that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
It would seem like also that, the algae blooms as you get into the hotter weather and into the summer, that if we have to move water, it would seem like we would be doing it while we don't have as much algae blooms in the lake. So appreciate you all really looking into this. So if we have to do releases for the best interest of the global system, and that we do it prior to hot weather and more algae blooms, seemed like to me.
Correct.
We look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Major. Thanks. Anyone else? Thank you, John, and thank you, Lawrence, and thank Jacob Dabrowski. That's a really cool picture, those flamingos. We'll move now to staff reports and our monthly financial report with Ms. Heater.
Good afternoon. So the monthly financial report that's in your packet is through the month of December. It's posted on our web for the public. And I'll give you a few highlights, and I try not to take too much of your time, but if you'll just allow me a little more time, I'd like to give you a little more context this time. Because I'm proud of what staff does, and I want to highlight some of the stuff behind the financials.
Well, you have the Employee of the Year, so you can have all.
Thank you. But I'll still try to keep it brief. So we've thus far, so first of all, there's no anomalies. We've collected $411 million in revenue through the month of December. $125 million from state appropriated funds through DEP, and $269 million from ad valorem. We're 79%, our collection rate's at 79%. For ad valorem last year we were at 77%, so we're on track. On average, we are spending about 61 million thus far. It's skewed a little bit. I think I mentioned that, your accrual process takes place the first 2 months. There was over $70 million accrued back, so we're really around the 80 plus to $90 million range monthly, which is, where we ended last year. We have spent 183 million, and we have $1.1 billion obligated on contracts. So, with that said, some of the stats behind this, which is very intriguing to me, and hopefully to you all as well. So invoices, so in order to, collect that $125 million in revenue from your intergovernmental, over 200 invoices have been generated and submitted thus far through this monthly financial. We've also made 2,772 payments to vendors. It's an average about 154 a week at 12.5 million a week. We've cut over 1,500 purchase orders. We currently have over 820 active contracts. We have over 600 vendors that are actively registered with this agency. We have 102 funds that your staff's responsible for. Funds being the revenue, types of revenue that come into the agency. 99 active grants. There are also grants that, we haven't signed the paperwork yet that have not been created in your financial system. So there are more, some that was discussed with, with the resiliency team. 279 projects. Those projects have network, they go down to the activity level of who charges to them, what type of work is being done, the different components. So it's even layered. 300 activities that's behind your financial statement. 232 expense accounts. Expense accounts meaning what you're buying. 69 revenue accounts. And over 1,500 transactions of $1 that comes into this agency that has to be linked to our bank account and to a general ledger account of where that money actually goes. That makes up these 12 lines of the monthly financial report. So I just kind of wanted to put a little bit behind the monthly financial. Okay, so also in your packet, we have a draft annual work plan for fiscal year 23. It will be finalized and is statutorily required for March 1st within your South Florida Environmental Report. It is in Volume 2, Chapter 2. We have 22 strategic priorities within your strategic plan that your staff has to then measure throughout the year. There's over 70 projects that they're being measured within this annual work plan, and over 53 success indicators. We have about a 94%, I'd say, grade, meaning that we met about 94% of those success indicators. There were a few that were not met through the metrics, and they tell the story of, some unplanned maintenance work that may have taken place higher than what the metrics was. And with that, that concludes my report.
Well, thank you, Ms. Heater. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll go down to general public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll hear first from Newton Cook, followed by Brian Tuttle.
I didn't get my normal head start. Boy, it's nice to get up here and say something pleasant. I want to thank the district and also the Fish and Wildlife Commission. We just conducted 2 incredible wounded warrior hunts, and I know we had them here, and they gave you medals not so long ago, but it's repeat. I mean, every time we do this, it's just amazing. And the volunteers that we get, the top chef guides that we get, And it's just amazing what happens out there. And we look forward to doing it again next year. And there's already people contacting me, can I do this? Can I? Well, you know, we work with the Operation Outdoor Freedom, who just do wonderful work, and that's the state forest, I might add. We have a youth hunt Saturday coming up, and that's another big event, STA One West. We'll probably feed somewhere between 140, 150 people, and kids and guides and moms and dads and helpers, a lot of good helpers and volunteers. I cannot thank the staff, the SDA staff, and the land management people and the FWC staffs, because we have to kind of move the lines a little bit to help these people out, and you guys have just done wonderful. We found that we could not find ducks in the morning for some of these veterans, and they went right back that afternoon, and they all killed limits. And to see that happen, that means, you know, there's a lot of cooperation going on. That's not easy to do. Also, heads up, March 25, we had the recreation meeting, but it's going to be on the West Coast, probably Fort Myers area. And there'll be a lot of discussion about the new area over there that the district's acquired. Mr. Bergeron's 100% right. We could solve all these problems if we could just send the water south. When I get up in rant and rave, I'm not trying to send the water anywhere. I'm just trying to get the water out of the friggin' lake. I don't care where it goes, but we got to get it out of the lake because we're going to kill the lake otherwise. And we're making progress, but I don't know we'll ever see the water moving south at the rate we need to drain the whole system as it historically was drained. And the only blockage we have in the whole system is at the Tamiami Trail. There's not another blockage from Orlando all the way to Florida Bay. We have to work on that. I might add one more thing. The bottom end of this lake, we can only get 6,000 CFS out of the bottom, south. That's correct, right? I keep waiting for these guys to say yes, but I know it's true. We got to get a structure at the bottom of the lake and do 18,000 CFS to match what we have coming in, because we get up to 30 during Irma, for example, okay? Those guys, that's who I listen to right there. They know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. We'll hear next from Brian Tuttle.
Thank you, board members, for indulging me. I'm here to talk to you about my property called Parkland Royale and TIFs. And I understand you have a luncheon scheduled on February 27th to discuss TIFs. I'll be at that luncheon via Zoom, but I wanted to make sure you understand how important it is. What is a TIF? The staff will explain to you in more detail, but basically to a land developer, a TIF is a reservation that was purchased by the trustee board back in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. They covered somewhere around 5 to 10 to 20,000 acres in the area. These TIFs were given to the trustee fund. They were then given to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, who then has dedicated you to release and administer these funds. You guys evaluate them. You determine a fee. I, as a developer, who I'm not a lawyer, I've told, and make sure I was told to tell you I'm not a lawyer. You administer a fee, we pay the fee, and we release the TIFs. You don't know me, but I'm one of the largest private land developers in South Florida. I've bought 300 to 400 pieces of property. I've assembled them into 30 or 40 large projects. I've probably gotten 30 or 40 ERPs from you, water use, South Florida permits. I'm the developer who cleared the C-51 canal west of 441. Came in, got a permit to clear it because I own all that land back there. Parkland Royale, it's a piece of property I own. It's 75 acres. It's in the wedge, okay? Everything in the wedge had TIFs on it. Every single piece has had them released. Of my 75 acres, 25 acres already had the TIFs released. There's 50 acres that still has TIFs on it. I applied for a water use permit, got a water use permit, no mention of TIFs. Modified the water use permit, no mention of TIFs. ERP issued, no issues of TIF. Modified ERP, no issue of TIFs. In my ERP, I was required to go out and buy $2.8 million in wetland mitigation credits. I went and paid them. I got my ERP, my water use, I followed the rules. We cleared the land. We dug the lakes. We filled the land. I've spent $30 million. Like every other time, I submitted to get the TIFs release, and I was told, no TIFs are being released, which makes the property worthless, right? It's worthless with a TIF because you can't build a home on it. So I'm here basically to say that I asked why the TIFs aren't being released, and the answer I got was the board was evaluating them. I said, that's fine, that's great. So again, I ask you to review this process in haste.
Please wrap up your comments.
Okay. Number one, my property was reviewed by staff, and there's no need for a canal in it. TIFs are for canals or roadways. There's no need for a roadway. I would ask you guys to review this process in haste so I can get these TIFs released so I can move forward with my project. Obviously, it would be financially devastating to me to have spent over $30 million and at this late stage to be told something about a TIF.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Tuttle. Board members, Mr. Tuttle also submitted some materials in reference to his comments, and they were printed out for you in your folders, and they will be posted in the board packet for this meeting. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comments on this item.
Thanks. And thank you all for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. We'll go to board comment, and I'll start with Mr. Bergeron.
Well, Drew, are you aware of this gentleman's, are y'all working on that, or can you give us?
Yeah, so I mean, release of reservations and TIF property reservations for canal easements is what is the subject of our lunch and learn later this month. Because I think after the last release of significant reservation, it was very much in the interest of this board to get more background on the process of how we release those real estate interests from the district and the state. And so we want to make sure you guys get that education first and then consider it at a future meeting. You know, could be March, could be April.
Okay, I think that's important, that we're following a process that are reasonable to property owners that, you know, are developing land, that we're reasonable in our regulations and how we go forward. And all I can say is, you've done such a great job, Mr. Chairman, our commander, that we're going to get out of here early if I don't talk too much. And the most dangerous thing you can do is give a redneck cowboy a microphone. But great meeting. I think we've got an awful lot accomplished, and it's an honor to sit with all of you and the best staff and employees in the world, and I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Steinle.
I'll help you out, Ron. No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Steinle. Carmen?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Ms.
No
Mees?
comment.
Thanks. Mr. Martinez. Mr. Butler?
I do have one quick thing to address. I referenced Lower Kissimmee Basin STA EIP earlier in my comments. They have reached out to Mr. Madrigal and have scheduled meetings with him and Mr. Griffin. So I commend EIP for stepping up and continuing their out engagement.
They're
I'll
listening
recognize
to
that.
you. Vice Chair?
No comment.
Thanks, Scott. I don't have any comments. I have one thing I would like to say, though, in a quick moment of silence. Before we conclude today's meeting, I'd like to tell you about an employee of ours who passed away on January 1st. Kristen Larson was an integral member of the district's Everglades and Estuaries Protection Bureau. She started at the district in 2000 in the water quality monitoring section and played a vital role in expanding our water quality monitoring efforts over the years. In 2021, she started with the Everglades and Estuaries Protection Bureau. She worked with private landowners and local governments on public-private partnerships. Her kindness, resourcefulness, and organization made her a good partner to the landowners, creating long-lasting projects, including the Parton Family Ranch, Dixie Ranch, Buck Island Ranch, and Eagle Haven Ranch. Kristen's going to be deeply missed. Not only will she be missed by the district team, but also by our natural resources. The mark she made in our lives and for South Florida will be felt for a long time, and I share my heartfelt condolences, as does the full governing board, with you all. Will you please join me in a moment of silence for Kristen? Thank you. Before we adjourn, I'd like to remind you, a vacancy does remain on the Audit and Finance Committee. If any board member would like to join that, please let me know, or actually, you probably can't let me know. You probably let Drew know, because I don't want to go to jail. I look forward to seeing you all back here in March and April. In May, we're going to take a trip to Stewart, so please stay tuned for our calendar, and the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.